Hello? There we go. I'd like to call to order the City of St. Helena regular City Council meeting, Tuesday, February 26th, 2019. We're going to have the Pledge of Allegiance. Could I ask our City Manager, Mark Prestwich, to lead us in the city? Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Now we're going to move on to public forum. Members of the public are entitled to speak on matters of municipal concern not on the agenda. Oh, I'm sorry. Roll call. Thank you.
Mayor Ellsworth.
Here.
Vice Mayor Doring.
Here.
Councilmember Shuto.
Here.
Knudsen.
Present.
Koperstein.
Here.
Okay, now we'll move on to public forum. Members of the public are entitled to speak on matters of municipal concern not on the agenda during public forum. Each person's comments shall be limited to 4 minutes. Each person is entitled to speak on any non-agendized item only once at any meeting. Brief questions by council members for clarification may be posed and answered, and council members may make requests that items be placed on future agendas, but in accordance with state law, no substantive discussion or action may take place unless and until the matter properly appears on the agenda. So at this point, is there any public comment? We have presentation from Nimbus Arts that's listed here. If you'd like to go first.
Thank you for having me. I'm Jamie Graff. I'm the executive director of Nimbus Arts, and we have a new project. It's not so new. We've actually been working on this project for quite some time. It's one of our Hundreds of Hands projects, which is basically the community's invited to create works of art that we end up putting in public places. This is our 5th. And this was born actually out of the aftermath of the fires here in the valley. I wanted to create a mode where people could come together and work on something that would ultimately be installed in the community as a kind of a way to come together and heal and feel hopeful. And so we started all this mosaic back then, but it's now transformed itself into this current program, and we're calling it the Portico Project because we intended to put that mosaic on doorways, kind of as a symbol of home and hearth and hope. So we've designed these now porticos. We're well on our way to wishing to install one. And we've had, over 100 people already work on the mosaic elements that are going into it. This is a quilt, which is inspiring the form of the mosaic. And we also thought that the quilt represented warmth and home. And so this is sort of the design that we're basing our cutting of our elements with. You can go to the next slide. And they're going to be installed. Now, this is not a scale rendition, but we will be creating a cement doorway that's clad in rusty metal, and where you see those cutouts and the mosaic's going to be embedded into the rusty metal. So it'll look more like an older structure and a kind of a soft relic, but then splashed with these wonderful elements of mosaic that the community has made. So we have the engineering for this. We've got a contractor that's willing to do this gratis. And we're looking for a speedway to try to figure out how we can create a plan to make, hopefully future public art installations go smoothly so we all know what we need to come up with and do and what kind of partnership we might be able to afford with the city in terms of any, installation or things like that. So again, we have a lot in place, and we're just kind of looking for a way to find a good home for this in downtown somewhere. We had proposed the possibility of Lyman Park over the pathway at some point in there, but we're open for other suggestions too. We really wanted to get this, our collaborators, our partners, the St. Helena Hospital is really pushing for us to get this done before the neighborhood table, and I think that's all doable. But so that's why I'm here. If anybody has any quick questions, I'm happy to answer.
So you're looking for where it could go?
Correct.
Is this something that we can talk about or agendize to talk about?
It is agendized for a brief discussion, but only for general direction, no final action. But it is agendized.
It seems to me like something that we should put you in touch with our streetscape design people, perhaps, in terms of location and this installation. And I know they have art on their minds generally, sort of a program of where we're going to place it and under what conditions. How does it get put someplace? I mean,
Yeah.
that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I've given, in the packet you have, I've given the list of the structural engineers that are doing the plans for us and the contractor, and then the sculptural artist that'll be cladding it, who has got a big background in public installations of sculpture. So our team's kind of hanging in there and waiting for direction.
Sure.
So.
Does anybody else have any? Yeah, David?
I'd also encourage, this is fantastic, really lovely. I'd also encourage us to engage with the Parks and Recreation Committee to, if it's going to potentially be on a public park, they're well equipped to participate and to help vet that process. I know this sounds like a pretty tight time frame, but
Well, I'm hopeful.
Yeah.
But, I've been communicating with everybody for quite some time, and there's no way to kind of, there's no format for paperwork or for, and I'd be thrilled to help kind of brainstorm what that might look like for future projects and how we can create partnerships to guide people like us that want to put something somewhere.
absolutely. And if it's in sort of one of our public facilities or parks facility, then absolutely Parks and Rec Committee would be a fantastic place to start that process. And then they funnel things up to council and
Okay.
at
So your
least
recommendation
that's
is I start with the parks?
Why don't, if you want to send me an email, then we can go from there. That way we get a kind of a conversation going through the email, and then we'll figure out a next step very soon. I mean, if you send it to me tonight, I'll respond in the morning.
Just to chime in, staff has kind of been interested in hoping to get some direction from council to support this initiative broadly, to allocate some staff resources to work with Nimbus or other folks who are interested in moving forward with public art. And it sounds like maybe there is a consensus on the council to...
Yeah, absolutely. For working with Nimbus.
I think we might want some kind of policy developed eventually, public art on public property as opposed to on private property, in a park versus on the sidewalk, or, something, so that going forward, which is why I suggested the streetscape people, because they're thinking about
And the
that
alleyways.
aspect of it.
Yeah.
So if you send me an email, then we'll figure out from there the next. Does that sound?
Staff is also I think part of Ms. Graff's issue is she came to us a little bit of time ago, and we were kind of struggling because, as Ms. Koberstein has pointed out, there is no process. And so we recommended she ask the council to kind of give some at least conceptual support for the idea, and then give some direction so staff can begin to formalize a way to plug in and engage with the city.
So if there's council direction and you would like to send an email that goes to staff to know as well as myself, maybe that's a way to keep the loop going. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any other public comment?
Good evening. I'm Anthony McKelly. I've given you all this letter, but I'm going to read it for everybody in the public. At the end of March, the county is going to enact new rules on wineries. They're also giving wineries that have violated their use permits until the end of March to come clean with their violations, and the county will do their best to bring them into compliance. Once the county has enacted new rules on wineries, the city of St. Helena should follow suit with the wineries we have in our city limits. To my knowledge, no winery has ever been audited by the city. I hope we don't have any wineries operating outside their use permit like the county does, but you never know. We should give violators 30 days to confess and then try to bring them into compliance. It is my understanding the county is going to require all wineries in the county to submit their TTB reports, that's Trade and Tobacco Bureau, and any other government reports to the county that is going to be kept confidential. Only the supervisors will be able to see these reports. The city of St. Helena should do the same. In addition, due to our water issues, we should require total amount of well water and city water used in winery operations. Due to our traffic problems, we should require information on amount of grapes grown on-site, grapes grown off-site that they own, grapes purchased by other vineyards, and do they custom crush any grapes for their entities. Also, due to traffic, wineries should give the city some idea as to how many visitors visit the facility in a year. The wine business has changed dramatically from when it all started with the Ag Preserve in 1968. Originally, only wineries could make wine on site. Now they throw lavish parties and sell trinkets. They are now called event centers. Now a winery property has a mega house, a guest house, a pool, a garden, bocce court, tennis courts, winery, and some vineyard. Whatever happened to protecting the vines in the valley? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if anybody else is going to have public comment, if we want to stand up just so we move it forward after the speakers.
Good evening. My name's Tom Belt. I live on Hillview Place. A couple of days ago, I emailed a letter to each of you, CC'd you a copy of it, and I emailed Mr. Prestwich. I'm concerned about the ADU situation in St. Helena and the impacts that it has on the privacy and everything that we have in our community, the peace and quiet that we enjoy. And I'm actually here tonight to make a correction to one of the things that I mentioned in that letter, because I recently went into the police department today and I asked one of our officers if they are enforcing noise ordinances now, whereas in the past the policy of the city was not that they would not issue a citation even after a warning if it was a public disturbance. I've been corrected and I've been told that that policy has been changed, and that now that our police department, if there is a recurring offense, they will issue a citation for disturbing the public. So this is something that has changed. It never used to be that way. I can tell you from my witness in being in St. Helena for the last several years that 5 years ago we had neighbors who were doing everything they could to get stopping the noise, and the police would not issue a citation because they did not consider the noise to be the noise that they heard to be a public, them to be the public. So we had to issue citizens arrest citations. But what I want to say tonight is I just had a house in back of me sell for $1.7 million in cash. It was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house. It had a detached garage, and the garage is 5 feet from my house, from my backyard. I went into the city just a couple of days ago, and I asked, not Noah, but yes. And basically I learned that there are no regulations to stop anyone from owning a house or property as a residence in St. Helena from building an ADU and ignoring all setbacks and all conditions that would normally prevent a house being occupied from a property line. Now, this particular house, the people had converted the garage into an office space, and then they tried to make it a bathroom. And you know, I did object to it. It didn't create a good neighborly relationship, but I did object to it, and it stopped. But now I know that this building that's 5 feet from my backyard could potentially be an ADU. Some discussions were made a couple of months ago, 3 or 4 months ago, about requiring ADUs to have a requirement to have a stipulation where they would be rented out for a certain number of years. And I also remember someone saying that of the ADUs that have been improved in St. Helena, that the majority of them, if not all of them, have been not ADUs in that they have been rented out. They've been just used for personal use or for party houses or pool houses or something. I think this is something that is threatening the whole entire community if we don't do something as a city to try and put some conditions on these ADUs that could potentially be built. And I'm grateful that we do have some protection now about the noise, but that's only after 10 o'clock at night. And I think being able to build homes that are going to be lived in that are on the property line or within 5 feet of a property line have the potential to create a lot of disturbance. And so I would really encourage the city council to look at if someone is going to be given the permission to build an ADU, to be able to require it to be rented out, because that's the whole purpose of the ADU in the first place. It wasn't to eliminate setbacks and things that we have in our city. It was to provide housing for people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any more public comment? Seeing none, I'll close the public forum, and we'll move on to reports by staff and City Council, future agenda items, and AB 1234 reports. I'm going to start with Mr. Brown, our City Attorney.
The City Council met in closed session just this evening, just before the regular meeting started, to discuss those 4 items designated on the agenda for that special meeting. No reportable action was taken at that closed session.
Thank you. Move to Mr. Prestwich, our City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. 2 items tonight. First, I think the city and the citizens are well aware that we've received a sidewalk grant. This was received a couple of years ago. And we're getting to a point now where that project is moving into a design phase. So the council approved a contract in late 2018. We had our first steering committee meeting this past week, and we are going to be having a community open house on March 22nd. This is going to be held at 1335 Main Street. That's the Goodman Building, the Ritchie Block Building that's vacant downtown. This open house is a drop-in format, so anyone can drop in between the hours of 10 and 2, and we're looking for feedback on what you like, what's missing, what do you like about the amenities today. We're beginning the big picture planning that will eventually refine over the next couple of months into a streetscape plan. We're going to bring the council an update on this, an overview of the entire project on March 12th at the next council meeting. And I'll remind the community and the council again on March 12th about the forthcoming community workshop. But that's going to be March 22nd from 10 to 2 downtown. We want to make it easy for everyone to imagine the downtown from that vista. And we'll be putting more information on the website soon. Secondly, the RV to Paradise effort is well underway, and there are flyers in the back of the room that relate to the RV to Paradise project. Again, this is a community grassroots effort to help provide stable housing for the victims of the Butte County fires. And anyone interested in donating to this can visit the website www.fwunv.org, and there's more information on these flyers, and we'll post this to the website as well.
Very good. Thank you. Our Finance Director, April, Ms. Mitz.
So, Mayor Ellsworth, council members, I would like to just point out in front of you tonight and on the back counter, there is, this is called a PAFR because finance, we like acronyms. So it's a popular annual financial report, and this is basically a Cliff Notes version of our CAFR. So our comprehensive annual financial report is 143 pages. This narrows it down to 14 pages. For very specifics, definitely go to the CAFR, but this is the first year that we are doing this reporting format that will go in conjunction with the CAFR. So it gives a quick snapshot. It's available in the back. We'll have it at City Council or at City Hall, and we'll also have it available on our website.
Thank you. This is, to me, very exciting, and I think very exciting for the community. I often say that city government is not more complicated than we can all understand. It just is often a different language. And the language of city finance can seem daunting until you start to understand it. And to me, this is going to really break down some of the concepts so people in the community can begin participating and understanding how the financial system works in the city that we all share. So I think this is a great step forward. Thank you. And our city clerk, Ms. Shafopoulos.
I am accepting applications for the vacancy on the Parks and Recreation Commission.
Very good. Are anybody from the police with any input, comment? Yes.
Lots of rain. There's a few areas of minor flooding at this point. We're monitoring the situation, but it doesn't seem like it's an issue at this time. The flood control measures that have been put in are doing their job.
Very good.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody from the library or fire department? I will move to Mr. Housh from the planning department.
Thank you, Mayor Ellsworth, members of the council. Just wanted to remind everyone that LAFCO is undertaking an update to their sphere of influence policies, and on Monday, March 11th, in Yountville at the Yountville Town Hall from 9 to noon, They're holding a meeting to accept public comment on those policies. So I just encourage everyone to go, and they're doing a little bit of a LAFCO 101 as the initial part of the meeting, and then they're taking comments from around 10 to noon. So I would encourage everyone to attend and participate in that process.
And this is the LAFCO, I'm sorry.
So the Napa County LAFCO is updating their sphere of influence policies, and they're holding a town hall meeting essentially in Yountville at the Yountville Town Hall as a kind of a midpoint in the county to take comments from the public.
Okay, and so LAFCO is the Local Agency Formation Commission, which it sort of helps cities and the counties in which they exist to communicate and decide forward progress.
Yeah, they specifically review boundary issues and utility extensions beyond boundaries. That's correct.
And the acronym is LAFCO, but Local Agency Formation Commission. Great, thank you. Ms. Smithies, our Public Works Director.
And as an update to Chief Foley's update, we have been monitoring the atmospheric rain weather event that we were having for the last 24 hours. We were informed of a sanitary sewer overflow in the Vineyard Valley Park on Paseo Grande Drive, and Public Works operations staff have been there around the clock today, bypass pumps and pumping to another manhole over the Sulphur Creek Bridge, so we don't have any overflows into our river and creek system. They're doing a great job, but it'll be crews around the clock keeping it running. So there is a peak estimated to happen around 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock this evening. The forecast at 2:30 p.m. this afternoon was that we'll get over 20 feet peak in the river, which means it'll be affecting low-lying areas on the east side of Silver Isle Trail, but it'll probably just get below or right at the base of our flood wall and our levee, so we'll be okay. In 2017, the highest since we've had the flood wall in place was 19.2 feet, which only got us about a foot below our flood wall. So even at the crest that they're predicting as of 2:30, we should be all right, and we have staff on call throughout the night.
So staff will be monitoring and on call throughout the
Correct.
night. Okay.
And I think after this meeting, we're going to go check out the levee. We did a 3 o'clock check-in. The river was well below our side of the banks, but getting close. We do know the county went door to door of the 5 residents that are in the county side, the east side of the river, to notify them that they may want to evacuate on their own, but on our side, we were okay. But we'll continue to monitor and provide any updates as we have them.
Very good. Thank you. Are there any council comments? I'll start with Mr. Knudsen.
Thanks, Mayor Ellsworth. I have 2 things to report. One was on behalf of council, I went to, and on behalf of the mayor, I went to the Turley Flats Calistoga Affordable Housing meeting at Turley Flats to thank the council, and that's really prior councils, for their support in getting Turley Flats built, and all of the different vendors and contractors and participants were there, and they also extended thanks, I think, individually to members of staff as well. But they have a little plaque which I'd like to give to you.
$20. This is a plaque that says, "Together we can, teamwork and support of Turley Flats." So this was, I think, a significant project that showed that we can begin to accomplish our housing goals. So, and David was kind enough to attend the meeting when I couldn't go, so I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And then just update from the Parks and Rec Committee. There is some further analysis that needs to be done, hopefully with Public Works, regarding the lighting, what we got from the lighting contractor, which was significantly higher than the budget that was allocated, and but there's some questions, and the committee asked staff to go back and try and understand further exactly what the elements were and why it was so different from the initial estimate. We also covered some WAPO, Miley, and Crane Park improvements that will be submitted for the next budget year. And then there was a discussion I think for the next meeting to something that's near and dear to my heart, to create a subcommittee to look at trails and open space. That's it.
Great, thank you. Ms. Chateau?
I'm the liaison to the library board, so I got to go to my first meeting, which was wonderful. And especially because the Friends of the Library were there to report on their fundraiser, which was the most successful one yet. They raised over $108,000 this year. They said it was a wonderful event. And the other information that I personally thought was very important and wanted to share with everyone is that now in St. Helena, we can get on the library website and we have access to the full subscription to the New York Times through our library, which is a big cost saving if anybody likes to read those articles. You can do that by going through the website. The other thing that I got invited to do as a city council person that was a first for me was to be the talent show judge at the high school. A high schooler reached out and asked me to do that. It was amazing. It made me so proud of our high school and the students there and the kind of talent they had. It was just a wonderful experience. I hope other people go next year. It was great.
Thank you for doing that. That's great.
Thank you.
Ms. Cooperstein?
Nothing from me.
Mr. Doring?
It's always a challenge to know what you're going to report on. We both serve on the Napa Valley Transportation Authority, so I don't know if you're going to mention this, but I will. The county-wide bicycle plan has been released for public comment. You can find a link on the Napa Valley Transportation Authority website. I don't know what that is, but you can Google that, I'm sure. I know that there's a public meeting that will be held on March 14th in Calistoga. The time and I believe it's in Calistoga, but the time is on the NVTA website. But it's pretty important for folks to comment on this countywide bicycle plan because it does have an element in it that focuses on the city of St. Helena and, of course, Napa Valley wide. For bicycle folks, this is your chance to make public comment on this.
We will be bringing that item to Planning Commission on March 5th, so if you would like to comment on it, please do. We're also begin discussing it at the Active Transportation Sustainability Committee on Wednesday, March 6th. So,
thank you. I didn't know that. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'm just going to piggyback on that a little bit. I was also at the NVTA meeting, the Napa Valley Transportation Authority, and Paul and I are both on that board, and that's a joint powers authority. So that this is another area where the city and the county and the other cities all interact. So where we can discuss regionally what we're doing. What happens on the roads doesn't stop right at our borders. So this is an excellent opportunity for us to participate in the larger regional discussion of choices that affect us. So I was there for that. The bike plan is coming out. Also, May is Bike Month in Napa Valley, and the Bicycle Coalition is working on a bike to work and bike to shop days, and so I started a dialogue with them, and so we'll learn more about that as we get closer to May. I want to talk a little bit about the mariachi event that's coming up. It's going to be at the elementary school on March 15th. It started out with one high school mariachi band from Washington State. There's a educational component to this too. There's going to be a workshop in Napa the following day on the 16th with mariachi bands from universities around California who are coming to talk about their degree programs that they have in this. And one of the bands from one of the high schools is coming up here to play on March 15th, and then we found out one from one of the colleges wants to come as well. So we now have two bands that are going to play. And I heard today that a representative from the Mexican consulate in San Francisco is also going to come up. So it should be quite an event, March 15th, 7 p.m. So I would recommend getting there early to the high school auditorium. I'm sorry, the elementary school auditorium. Yes, we changed the venue, thank you. The elementary school auditorium, March 15th. I spoke yesterday talking about fire preparedness. Mark, the city manager, and I met with the PG&E representative to talk about fire risk mitigation that we're looking at, and we're meeting with Supervisor Diane Dillon, our county supervisor, tomorrow to talk about this as well. So just so the community knows that we're working forward on this. It's wet out there now, but it's going to be summer soon. So the other thing that came up from this meeting was being ready for any disaster for our community, whether it's a fire, flood, or earthquake. That what we can do as a community is for everybody to be prepared. Now it's pretty easy to go to the Red Cross or Amazon and order a emergency pack that gives 3 to 5 days of food and water, medical supplies, a radio. I think I went on today and the cost goes from $50 to $100 for a pack that serves 2 people for 72 hours. So the more that we can each be as self-reliant as possible while these things go on, the better off we'll all be. So we're ordering ours this week at my home, and I hope that people will go to Amazon or Red Cross and just take a look so that we can all do what we can at home, and we'll work as a city also to make sure we're doing our best. And then the final thing is on a sad note. This week, one of the St. Helena police dispatchers who had been with us for a long time passed away. She medically retired last year and unfortunately passed away this last Sunday. She worked for the city of St. Helena from 2001 to 2018. Her name was Janie Prenton. There will be a memorial service for her March 2nd in Vallejo, 2 p.m., 110 Los Santos Court at the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. I'd just like to just have us take a moment of silence and send our thoughts in that direction. Thank you. Okay.
Mayor Ellsworth, I'm sorry, I forgot one other thing I wanted to mention, that I did have a meeting with Supervisor Brad Wagconnect and then a city council person from the other cities on climate change. And so we're agreed that we want to work together on the issue. We all think it's a big deal, and we want to see how we can address it as a county, and we're going to continue to meet.
That's great.
Okay.
That's great. And I'm always encouraging of this cities collaborating with each other and with the county and getting this good regional discussion going, because our choices all affect each other. So thank you. Okay, so now we are going to move on. Let's see if I can find my agenda here. We'll move on to the consent calendar. Members of the council or the public may ask that any items be considered individually for purposes of considering alternative action for extended discussion or for public comment. Unless that is done, one motion may be used to adopt all recommended actions. So I'm just going to read through the numbers, and if anybody wants to pull one, they can speak up. 8.1.
Please pull that.
We'll pull that one.
Thank you.
8.2. 8.3. 8.4. 8.5, 8.6, 8.7.
Is 8.7 the large water
Yes.
user one? Okay, so that one I'm just not going to vote on, but I don't have to pull it, correct?
You have to pull it so that you don't vote on it.
That's right. No, that's right. You don't have to pull it. You can just not vote. And I'm the same with the minutes one. Okay.
Okay. Very good. So is there a motion to pass the consent items with the exception of 8.1?
So moved. I thought we were going to separate those, but I'm not sure.
The record can simply reflect the council member's abstention on those 2 items.
Okay.
Well, in that case, then I don't need to pull 8.1 because I will simply abstain.
We're both abstaining from 8.1 because
Somebody
we
else
weren't
needs to
here
pull
for the
it.
minutes. Oh, okay.
Somebody else was pulling that.
Oh, there were? Okay.
So move approval of the consent calendar with the exception of 8.1.
Second.
Okay. May we have the roll call?
Vice Mayor Doring,
Yes.
Councilmember Koberstein,
Yes.
Chateau,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes. Okay, and now we're going to move on to, I'm sorry, to 8.1. And is there staff comment or comment from the public? Please come up to the lectern.
My name's Barry Brown. I live at 1815 Hillview Place, and we would like to address the minutes of the October 9th meeting, specifically section 10.3. We attempted to research and review the meeting, but were unable to do so. Apparently there were technical difficulties as reported by staff, and the October meetings were not able to be recorded. We felt it was important to review the video so that we could remind ourselves and the council of the discussion that took place that evening that led us to believe that further action and changes related to this matter and code violation enforcement specifically would be forthcoming. There are also errors in the minutes as they've been presented. The first factual error is the planning department's statement to approve the construction of 2 storage sheds and approve design review exemption. More accurately, these 2 buildings had already been constructed. The more egregious code violation was the more recent. It was, in truth, a bathroom already in place with the plumbing, water, fixtures, and a jury-rigged underground human waste disposal system. In addition, there was landscaping that had been installed to hide the access pipe for the clean-out. The intention and facts of this matter should be reflected in the minutes. The ensuing discussion then resulted in the apparent dismay of the City Council when they learned that they were unable to impose penalties or fines as they had expected to be able to do. Further discussion then regarding code violations and code violation penalties resulted in the City Council directing city staff to review current code violation penalties and make recommendations for meaningful penalties to impose or be able to impose in the future. This should also be reflected in the minutes. We'd also like the council to consider refunding the $1,000 that we paid with the expectation of a reasonable or fair outcome to our appeal. It appears that there was never going to be a successful appeal because the council was hamstrung by a lack of authority and the inability to penalize or fine the property owners. We should have been informed ahead of time so as not to waste our money or the city council's time. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on this?
Anthony McKelly, I don't have a comment on this, but I might have missed one of the items. 8.6 or 7? Is that the one where 2 council people are going to get to look at the water records? Because it doesn't say that here, it just says second reading. Am I?
Yes.
Or is that not happening tonight?
No, that is. You're correct.
Still be able to pull that?
We've already voted on it.
We've already voted on that. But if you want to send me an email or we can have a conversation about it. Is there any other comment on 8.1?
I just have a question. How do we, if we're going to amend the minutes, how do we proceed? I mean, we were basically asked to put more in the minutes than is reflected.
So the process is that if any of the council members want to make that motion to amend the minutes, if you do have a recollection with respect to the suggestions made by the speaker or otherwise, you can certainly offer those and they could be voted on. Alternatively, if you don't remember as you're sitting here, you can also ask the city manager to look into it with the city clerk and report back as to whether those items would be appropriate to add to the minutes.
Does that sound like a reasonable way forward to?
Yeah, did I understand the video is not available? Is that?
We had technical difficulties. I do have them. We just need to work with my agenda management software to get it uploaded.
Okay. My suggestion or motion would be that we do ask the clerk to look at it with the manager. I do recall specifically the question about our enforcement abilities and some follow-up on that.
Is that sufficient direction?
Yes, and then if there were no other concerns about the minutes for that evening, it would be appropriate for the council to adopt those minutes otherwise, and with that direction with respect to that specific item.
Okay. And I think that will satisfy what you're asking for. Okay, so I will, if somebody would like to make a motion to pass the 8.1 with that.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Koperstein?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doran?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes.
And the other two are abstaining.
Okay, we will move on to our public hearings. Before I forgot to mention a happy birthday to Ms. Koberstein as well. We have the balloon here, so I'll say that before we get into the public hearings. Okay, we'll move into the. Do you have a statement, a birthday statement? Okay, so we'll move into the public hearings. 9.1, consideration of approval of a resolution approving a request for an exemption from St. Helena Municipal Code 13.04.055, which requires a connection to the public water system for the single-family residence to be located at 500 Mills Lane. This was prepared by Ms. Smithies from the Public Works Department.
Yes, thank you. Per the municipal code, it requires the owner of any structure located with the city in which plumbing to be installed shall connect the plumbing of the structure directly to the public water main. The property owner of 500 Mills Lane, Mike and Debbie Preston, have submitted a development application to build a single-family residence on the property using an existing well to meet their water needs and not connect to the existing public water main, which is approximately 1,800 feet away. There are provisions in the municipal code that allow the property owner to apply for an exemption when the property is located more than 1,000 feet from the nearest main. They're also they're on approximately, the property itself is approximately 3.2 acres. It's the site of an old vineyard with frontage on Mills Lane. It's surrounded by agricultural zone property with some family structures on the adjacent properties. The Preston family have an existing on-site wall that was previously used to irrigate the vineyard and provide water for an existing bathroom structure. They wish to utilize the existing well for their planned home development and have separately applied for a new agricultural well, which is still under review for newly planted vineyard that they'd like to put out there as they develop the site. Prior to them moving forward with their planning application, they must go through this process before we can go to Planning Commission with conditions of approval on their project. So if there are any questions.
Are there any initial questions or comments from council? Mr. Knudsen?
Yeah. I'm sorry, Ms. Smithies. I forgot to call you about this, but I did talk to the city manager last week. Is there potentially a closer connection at College Avenue or Kid Ranch Road from a water perspective rather than Mills Lane?
They would be connecting, you'd have to get easements through private property.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And have there been any other plans on Mills Lane to extend water treatment or water service to any of the other properties that are further down Mills Lane?
Since most of them are designated agriculture, they're allowed to replace their wells or drill or submit applications for new wells should their old one go dry. Per our no, so no, and there's no reason to for my recommendation to install 1,800 linear feet of pipe that's a dead end with no development proposed in our current general plan or general plan update.
Thank you.
Any other council comments, Mr. Doring?
I wonder if we have a condition for the future if services become available and that are reasonably feasible to connect to. I mean, this could be 10 years from now or 20 years from now, that we have a condition that they must connect at that point.
I could see how that could be written in the plan. Right now, if the line does pass in front of their home, they are required to connect on any remodel, I think, over a certain amount of funds.
I'm just thinking of a situation where currently it's 1,800 feet. What if there was a situation in the future where it was that was reduced to under 1,000 feet or something like that? Is this a permanent pass, or do we expect some property owner in the future to connect when there's more feasibility or different circumstances?
I just was getting passed a note from my planning director here that we can condition it that if future development comes in, they'd be required to connect.
Thank you.
How far away is this from the proposed hotel?
1,800 feet. So LaFata
That's
is
as far as the hotel would take it?
Yes, because the hotel's proposed to connect to LaFata, and since that currently is a deadline system, the condition on that project would be connecting to Main Street, so we have a loop system. Because one of the problems with dead end lines, you start getting sediment buildup, which can become a health concern if it starts getting back in the system.
And what's involved in the permit for the additional well?
It goes, on our website, there's a full step-by-step process, studies required to submit. They have to do a well analysis of they have to provide a map of the nearest wells around them. And we've been traditionally and consistently requiring them to get a test from a hydrologist to confirm that anything, they will not impact their neighboring properties and their wells.
So you can still drill a well for agricultural purposes?
Correct.
You couldn't drill a well for residential?
If you're beyond the 1,000 feet main and council approves it, the exception.
Thank you.
Open it up.
I'm going to open it up for public comment. Is there any public comment at this time? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment and come back to the council. So the direction, I'm sorry, my agenda, my electronic agenda is not coming up. So the recommendation is to adopt a resolution approving the request.
I'd like to add that the applicants are here. If you have any questions of them directly, I apologize for that.
Okay. Do we want to? Is it? I don't have a question. Does anybody? Okay. So the recommendation is to adopt. I would entertain a motion.
I just a discussion among council. I think that Vice Mayor Doring's idea to mandate at some point in the future, if in fact a connection is closer or available, that it should be so. I think it's been the city's intent not to encourage well outside of agricultural uses, so that would seem to be a reasonable approach.
How does that part of this, it wouldn't be connected to this approval, but how would we move forward on laying something like that up for the future?
The city council could make that part of the motion, and the city clerk would insert that into the resolution.
Okay, very good.
So it would simply be, as I understand it, it would be a fairly brief condition that wouldn't require a great deal of draftsmanship or anything like that. So
okay. So if we had a motion that included that as well.
That would be appropriate if that's the council's direction.
What suggested language do they have, Noah?
I just was identifying that the council could provide direction to condition, and this condition would be in the planning commission's approval for the development, should they grant it. So it would acknowledge that the council granted the exception to the rule and condition any future development to connect to city services if available within 1,000 feet or whatever the policy reference said.
And so move with that clarification.
And is there a second?
I second.
And a roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Councilmember Chateau?
Yes.
Koberstein?
Yes.
Knutson?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. Okay, that is our public hearing, and now we will move on to new business.
I think the applicant has a question
I'm sorry.
potentially.
If the applicant has yeah, please, certainly come.
I just wonder on that, is there a time limit or a question? I'm just thinking 10 years down the road, somebody brings the water main 100 feet closer, and now some ordinance is not clear enough, and so city comes and says, oh, they're 100 feet closer, now it's 1,700 feet, and you've got to do this, or maybe it gets down to 900 feet, right? And it's 10 years down the road, and I don't have $250,000 laying around to extend the water main, or I can't get the easements to extend the water main to connect. Like, it's very gray, and I just see that as a potential problem. I mean, I would love to connect to water main if it was closer and it was, we were capable of doing it now, that'd be great. I'd way prefer public water than well water.
I think the intent was to have the Planning Commission grapple with that language, and they're going to have more time to get into the weeds, which we don't have time, but those are very good points. You want to have some parameters, but I don't think we really are going to get into that right now with our approval. It's going to go back down. The direction was to go back down and have that condition sort of fleshed out.
As a kind of a city standard type thing too, right? Because I can see that being a problem, not only for our project, but for future projects
Agreed.
as well.
No
right?
doubt, yeah.
If it's not really clear. Yeah.
So in the meantime, staff will be thoughtful and work with the applicant to come up with some language that is very clear on when the trigger would happen. Just hearing this concern, it sounds like probably something about redevelopment of the site. So total new construction or something along those lines, if that's in keeping with the draft.
Absolutely understandable in that situation, for sure. So what I'm hearing is you're approving it. It's just you're having the staff condition you're going to be working on with the Planning Commission. Okay. Yeah, great. Thank you for listening.
Very good. Thank you.
I'm a little confused. Don't we still have to modify the resolution that we're adopting tonight?
The resolution, my understanding was that the motion was for the resolution to incorporate that condition.
Okay. So do we feel comfortable where we're at? Okay. So we're going to move on to new business. I'm going to ask Mr. Pardon?
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
We're going to move on to new business. Is it appropriate? I'm going to ask the city manager, if we have a lot of people here for one item, to move that item up. What would you think?
Certainly.
I think that there are a lot of people here for the RSO item, for the referendum item. And so I want to move that up. It's item 10.4. And discuss that now. That's consideration of approval of one or more of the following options on this.
I don't know if we want to do that because I think there are a fair balance of people here for different items, and I don't know.
Okay.
You're basically, I can see people on that side of the room here that maybe for another item.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that makes sense. But
Okay, we'll stick with the agenda as laid out. How's that?
I would just say we could put our 10.5 after 10.6.
That's fine. No, we can do that. Yeah, we can move it around.
Okay. So what would you suggest going with, starting with?
Skip 10.5.
Okay, so we'll start with 10.1 and we'll just move forward and then okay. So this is new business 10.1, consideration and approval of a resolution authorizing the refinancing of outstanding obligations of the water system via entrance into loan agreement secured by the net revenues of the water system, and 2, execution of said loan agreement and related documents. This is Finance Director Ms. Mitz.
Right. Thank you. I'd actually like to introduce Ken Deeker. He's our municipal advisor who has helped us through this process. We have a brief presentation, just really talking about the statistics and what I'm very happy to say is the money that we're going to save. So here's Ken.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Ken Deeker with Del Rio Advisors. Yeah, so we created a term sheet and went out to the marketplace to private lending institutions that work in the public finance arena. We sent to 19 lending institutions. We received 6 responses back, very competitive. And this is to refund some 2006 water bonds. The winner was JP Morgan Chase, being very aggressive at a 2.62% interest rate. The current rates on the bonds range from about 4.125 to 5%. The total savings over the life of the bonds, which by the way goes out to 2032, we are not extending the term. It's the same term as the existing obligation. Is a little over $750,000, or averaging about $57,700 per year, and that's the savings results. The net present value benefit of that is a little over 11%. CDAC has guidelines that generally state that any net present value savings in excess of 3% are worth consideration. We're at 11%, so this is a fabulous refunding. I've also put on the screen here the estimated cost of issuance. All these savings numbers are inclusive of all those costs, so those are the true savings that will come from this transaction. The interest rate is locked through the proposed closing date of March 14th, so the council will take action tonight. We'll finalize the numbers. We believe the cost of issuance will just be slightly lower, so we'll do some slight adjustments on the numbers, finalize them, and plan to close on March 14th, assuming, again, council approval tonight. We have with us tonight debt service savings. It's a little bit hard to read up there, but it is about $57,000 per year as compared to the prior bond. So it's significant savings given the size of the transaction at about $5.8 million. So significant savings. We do have members of the financing team here tonight, our bond counsel with Jones Hall, Dave Fama, and James Wozniak, Nikki Tallman, and Rick Brandis from Brandis Tallman. They're the placement agent. They're the ones who sent the term sheet out to the various lenders. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions you might have on the transaction.
Are there any initial questions from council? Seeing none, I'll open it to public comment. Seeing none, I will bring it back to the council. Oh, pardon? Oh,
I was just going to say
yeah.
thank you. Thank you for saving us money.
Well, thank you very much, everybody, and thank you for being here. I guess, is there any additional comment? It looks like everybody did a good job finding a way to find a better way for us. So I'm going to entertain a motion to let's see.
I move approval of the recommended action.
There we go. Second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Councilmember Knudsen?
Yes.
Chateau?
Yes.
Coberstein?
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes. Okay, we'll move on to 10.2. This is review and consideration of the 2018 St. Helena Housing Element Progress Report. And this is prepared by Mr. Hausch, the planning director.
Thank you, Mayor Ellsworth, members of the council. I do apologize for the format of the presentation. I'll get into it a little bit in my presentation, but the state is mandating how we provide this information to them, and so that's what's resulted in the spreadsheet with a variety of different font sizes, some of which are easier to read than others. But I would just that was predetermined. So anyway, it's my goal to be brief in the interest of time. I know there's a lot of items on the agenda. There's some background in the report talking about housing elements in general and how we're in the fifth cycle of ours. Previously, housing elements were somewhat aspirational. The city was in the 2009 through 2014 housing element. We were tasked with accommodating 121 new housing units. Anyone who's familiar with St. Helena would identify that as aspirational, I think. The most recent housing element, which we're in currently, which was adopted in 2015, identifies 31 units. So obviously they become much more realistic, and I think the state acknowledged some of the changes and the realities and wanted to go in a more realistic viewpoint. It's being predicted, however, that communities should have some concern over the direction of how these may go, given that just the pressure the state is trying to put on communities to construct more housing. And so a lot of folks are anticipating that future RENA allocations will be both aspirational and try to include some mandated elements. So just to be aware of that, I think it's anecdotal at best, but it's important to talk about the fact that the state is getting more and more involved in local decision making over housing and is trying to have more and more influence. It was brought up by Mr. Belt, some of the concerns over ADU construction. Those changes in our regulations were mandated by the state. We adopted those in reaction to state law, which directed cities throughout the community or throughout the state, including cities and counties, to do that. So they do allow the conversion of existing structures, even if they are on the property line, to ADUs. New construction does have mandated setbacks, but it's worth noting that the state is getting more and more involved and taking away less and less discretion of the cities with regards to housing development. Our most recent allocation of 31 units, as I mentioned, included 8 very low-income units, 5 low-income units, and 5 moderate-income units. RENA is not a mandate, so that's important to talk about. However, many grant funds and those types of things are being tied to cities' compliance with both our reporting requirements and our RENA compliance. And so many members of the council and the public will recall 2 years ago, the city had not been up to date on our reporting requirements with the state. We brought, I think, 6 years worth of housing element reports to the council for adoption in order to get into compliance with the state because we had not been up to date on that. And that's what allowed us to maintain and gain the approval of the downtown sidewalks grant project, the $1 million project for the sidewalks. So anyway, the state is merging grant funding with housing compliance and housing reporting compliance. So it's just an important element to talk about. Sheet D, Table D in the report that will be submitted to HCD, Housing and Community Development, it's the Department of the State, identifies some of the progress that the city's been making on our housing element direction. So that is essentially a spreadsheet which identifies the goals of the housing element and then the city's progress to date. The far right column, and so I'm sorry, there's no page numbers on this. So if you get past the tiny font, then you'll get to Table B, and that talks about some of the years of construction of homes. And then the next table is Table D. It looks like this, members of the public. And so this talks about the right column, the status of program implementation. That's where city staff reports the steps that the council and the city has made towards implementing the goals and objectives that were identified in the adopted housing element. So just something to pay attention to. Obviously, as we move forward with the housing strategy, we're going to be looking to this, and we'll be, I think, able to talk about how we've met many more of these objectives. It's important to note in this RENA cycle, we've built 44 units to date. So we've been assigned 31 RENA allocations. We've built 41 units. And I think that's something that's should be celebrated for St. Helena. They are somewhat flexible in the units they count. ADUs are allowed to count towards those units, so that's something to pay attention to. And staff does want to just highlight the fact that our most recently presented RENA numbers, which were presented last year, are likely to change. So the Turley Flats project, when that project was approved, was mandated to have 3 affordable units and 5 market rate units. The developer, Calistoga Affordable Housing, changed that to be a fully affordable housing project with a number of those units to be designated as very low income and some as low income. So we will be modifying the most recently approved numbers to accommodate those changes. I have to work with HCD to document how we can do that, because that project was approved originally in the previous housing cycle. However, the council has allocated significant funding during the current. So I need to work with them to see how we can take credit for those. But it's important to talk about the fact that we are moving forward with more affordability than was previously counted in the current numbers. Similarly, our town St. Helena has been, it was approved as a all low income project. However, they're pursuing very low income tenants and loan recipients. The council allocated additional funding to help meet those needs should they be able to find those applicants. Meeting those loan criteria is very difficult, and so they haven't settled on the number of folks who are going to be very low income that are going to qualify, but it's likely that staff will be bringing updates to those RENA numbers to get us some more very low income folks that we can count towards our RENA allocation. Just be aware of that. I don't have those numbers yet, but that is coming. The last thing I wanted to talk about is just the fact that, similar to the state mandates, housing is becoming more regional, and so many council members and community members will be familiar with the Association of Bay Area Governments, ABAG. That's kind of the Bay Area planning body, and then there's the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, MTC. That's the Bay Area transportation body, so to speak, regional transportation body that allocates a lot of the federal funding. Well, ABAG and MTC have essentially merged into one body. So planning and housing numbers are kind of being merging with transportation. And so as a lot of these priority development areas are being mandated by the state, which says put more of your housing adjacent to transportation corridors, the way that the state is going, and even the funding bodies coming down from the federal government, are merging those two organizations in a way to try to better allocate housing resources in areas where transportation is also going. We're seeing that at our level with NVTA getting more and more involved in housing, looking for regional collaboration, and the CASA, which our board's one of our supervisors came and presented talking about the CASA Compact, is a regional housing compact that's being championed by many larger communities in the Bay Area as a regional housing collaboration, and they're trying to push legislation through the state. I don't have a lot of information to share on CASA right now, but just it's something to be aware of, that these are the trends that housing is going in. And in 2022, when we start to get our new RENA allocations and some of the funding that's tied to where we've been reporting and where we've built housing, all of that information is likely to be kind of compiled and built on directing how housing is going to occur in the future and some additional state mandates. So I don't have anything else to add. I do feel like we're making good progress on our housing element, and we will likely make additional progress once we're able to get some more traction on the housing goal that the council has prioritized. With that, I'm happy to take any questions from the public or from the council.
Thank you. And just for clarification, HCD, that acronym is?
Housing and Community Development.
Okay, and then RENA is the acronym for?
Regional Housing Needs Assessment.
Okay, thank you. Is there any initial council comment or questions?
I have two quick questions. In doing the Turley project, we took on some units from the county. That applies to the next cycle.
That's correct.
Okay. And on the McCorkle project, we're getting deed restricted units on Grayson. Are they going to count? But in this year?
Unfortunately, they will not be able to count because the term was only 20 years and not 30. And so it's to count as a deed restricted unit, it has to count for 30 years. I do think we may be able to count them in a different category, which is called preserved units. But again, it's getting more complicated and they're kind of changing the rules every year. So I'm hoping to be able to count those for something. We will not be able to count them as affordable units because of the limited term.
But lesson learned.
Yes. Yes.
Any other initial council comments? I'm going to open it up to the public. Is there any public comment? Please come up and please line up up here so that we can move through fairly quickly.
Pat Dell, 25 San Juan Court, St. Helena. ADUs are simply not appropriate meeting of the RENA numbers. I mean, we've never done a legitimate survey of the second units in St. Helena. We tried, I think, about 2 or 3 years ago and didn't get good information back. But we know from everybody that we've talked to that either someone has built an ADU because they don't want to live in the big house anymore, or someone has built one for their relatives on the weekend, whatever, but they're not being rented out. And we need rentals desperately. And you seemed pleased, Mr. Hausch, that we had ADUs and that they helped meet the number of units that we're supposed to have. I'm not pleased about that. And I don't think other affordable housing advocates are pleased about that. And I don't know what you can do to reflect the opinions of the public back to HCD, but as long as they continue to do that, people will slip under the wire and they won't build the housing that's needed.
Thank you.
I have to just echo what was just said. I talked to you earlier this evening about it. If we're getting RENA credit for allowing ADUs to be built and they're not being used for housing, it's a smokescreen. It's like talking about climate control and not really saying you're doing something, but you're really not. It doesn't make any sense to me at all. I mean, it's just, it's worthless. There should be some requirement, if we're going to allow a ADU in this city to be built, that it be built for housing, for affordable housing, for a 5 to 10 year period, whatever. I mean, I just don't, I mean, I can see how the city is grappling with trying to comply with all of these federal regulations and state regulations, but if it's just a smokescreen, if it's not really helping, come on. It doesn't make any sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any more public comment on this issue? Is there any council comment? Is there, as we work off the housing element and move into this housing strategy we're working on this year to actually move from the theory of housing and affordable housing to the actual implementation. Are there some strategies to incentivize ADU owners to rent? Is that something we can look at in a housing strategy?
Yeah, and I just will say I am pleased that we are moving towards meeting our RENA numbers. However, I absolutely agree with Ms. Dell that the fact that the state mandates certain numbers or directs certain numbers and then also allows us to count ADUs and Mr. Belt identified is convenient for us, because I do agree with them that many ADUs that are built are not actually rented or used as separate housing units. From my standpoint, being able to satisfy the state's direction is a good thing in the big picture because it'll help us secure funding, I think, in the future. However, I completely agree that that is not a way to meet the housing needs of this community. And there are multiple approaches that need to be met. Incentivizing ADUs that are then rented out at market rate or below market rate units are one. But St. Helena is subject to unique economic forces here, and frankly, I think building apartments is probably the most effective way to actually get more housing units that are available to be occupied by folks who are of limited means, whether they're low income or not, because those are the only types of housing that are not subject to the pressures of second and third homes.
Thank you. So the recommended action here is that we review, consider, and file this report. Is there any other comment from council? My only thought is to keep this on the front burner with the housing strategy this year, making this the year that we really move forward. Seeing Turley Flats actually come in was a big step, showing that there's a process and we can hopefully streamline it and find more efficiencies. But I think if we file this with the idea that we file it on the front burner, are we good with that, everybody?
I was also thinking, even if the state doesn't require it, we could set the standard for ourselves if we're able to do better. Like if the ADUs, if we know that they aren't really being used for rentals, then we have to find 3 other one, right? I mean, as a city, we could consider that.
Yeah, so as we look at our housing strategy, we put these things in place and we be the city that sets the example. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we'll file this and move forward. Now we're going to 10.3. This is the discussion and consideration of Spring Mountain Road traffic calming and safety improvements. This is prepared by our Chief of Police, Tim Foley.
Before we get started, I'm going to recuse myself from this because of the location of my house to the issues that are before us tonight.
Okay. Good evening. Thank you for considering this. In October of last year, we met with a group of concerned citizens about the traffic conditions on Spring Mountain Road, and a number of possible solutions were presented, and we have them listed in the report, and I'll go through them just kind of briefly. One is at the intersection of Spring Mountain Road and Spring Mountain Court was to add an additional stop sign to make it an all-way stop. It's currently 2 out of 3 directions, and this would provide a safer option for pedestrians to cross the street, and this is required consideration and approval by the City Council, so that's on the list. Installation of signage for slow school zones in the area of the middle school, and there's 2 different kinds of signage that would be put up in both directions. And then we're also doing a traffic survey. The city engineer and Public Works is doing a traffic survey to look at those issues a little bit more deeply, along with reducing the speed to the state standard, which is 15 miles an hour within a school zone. On Spring Mountain Road, we were going to look at installing some signage just past Spring Mountain Court, eastbound of the city limits, says curves ahead, reduce speeds. We're going to look at purchasing 2 radar devices that would flash the speed for the vehicles as they came both directions, and would also provide us the opportunity to download the information and present an hour-by-hour spreadsheet so that we could target enforcement for when, someone was noticed going in excess of the speed limit. Some of the other things, we're going to do some visual narrowing of the roadway, particularly on the curved part above Spring Mountain Court toward the city limits in both directions, so that that might have a calming effect on the traffic flow. And then obviously there's going to be some improvement in community awareness, community safety, working with the school district on student safety and crossing the streets, that kind of thing. We've done some enforcement. There was enforcement prior to the meeting. There were numerous tickets issued. It had a minimal effect. People were back speeding again. We've gone out over 60 times in the last couple months, spending an hour at a time at various points in time. We've issued a we went out 61 times. We issued 8 citations, 22 warnings, and of the other times there was no notice of any excessive speed or vehicle code violations on those other occasions. So about half the time there was nothing noted. The other times there was some action taken by the officers, and that was at various times. The stop sign consideration, it creates some continuity at the intersection, an all-way stop. North Carolina Department of Transportation said all-way stops reduce accidents about 68%. And with people on their cell phones and that kind of thing crossing intersections, there is no other spot from the school all the way up to provide a safe avenue for people to cross the street. So that was part of the considerations in putting that there. There's a number of walkers that go to the reservoir. Again, the school's in close proximity. On the other side of the equation, it does create a false sense of security sometimes. It promotes stop sign violators because they're going to roll through the stop sign. So that would be another issue. And it may cause some traffic backup at some point in time. So having those in place, I imagine there's some traffic backup coming into town during the morning commute rush. The radar devices that we propose, like I said, they'll give us some immediate, there's some feedback so that we can track the speeders and focus our attention during the hours, so making it most productive. There would be an immediate visible notice to the individual driving so that they would see what their speed is. The traffic calming, I turn it over to our wonderful Public Works Director to talk about some of the striping and stuff if you want to enhance what you might be doing.
Some of the opportunities to promote traffic calming would be to just do striping, since we do have written in our fire code, we are not allowed to do traffic calming measures as far as bumps, speed bumps or speed tables in our streets, but we can do striping that makes the feeling of a narrowing effect to hopefully have traffic naturally slow down. The county's also working on updating their like the rumble strips and they're also called clacker tabs that are a little more in-depth buttons on Silver Isle Trail, and I would like to propose that we work with them on doing something more permanent on Spring Mountain Road, since they connect as it goes into Sonoma County. I think we do have an opportunity here to do some safer traffic calming in collaboration with the county, maybe not particularly just on our own, since we own just a short segment, but on a longer term goal would be to collaborate with them, since they have a longer stretch along Spring Mountain Road, and maybe we could partner with them either through a federal grant and or mutual aid response with programming with our Measure T funds.
Then, funding for the 2 radar devices. We talked with April earlier, and there's funds available in the COPS grant that would be suitable for using to purchase the radar devices. And so we would seek your approval also for that, to purchase those as soon as possible using the COPS grant.
Is there any initial council comment?
Yeah, I have a comment. I like this program, but I have concerns about the additional stop sign. I think using stop signs as a calming device when you maybe, I don't know if we've met the warrants for a stop sign. Is there such a thing at this intersection?
So The timing of the publishing, we did not, we did move forward with having a technical memorandum completed by Interwest Consultants, who's done a couple others for us within town. And they said that based on their results and lack of traffic accidents, that it did not meet the warrants for a stop sign in the northbound direction.
Yeah, I generally think it's not a good practice to install stop signs to try to slow down traffic. I understand the pedestrian crossing issue here, and maybe there's something about signage, additional signage, pedestrian crossing ahead. Maybe there is some paint that can be applied across the road to delineate where there is a pedestrian crossing area. But I just, I'm hesitating with the stop sign. I think it may, this is a busy road, I think, in the mornings and evening rush hour times. And to force people to stop there, I have some concerns about the people who live right there and traffic backing up in front of their homes. So I'm hesitant to approve that part of it, but I think the rest of it is good.
Any other initial council comment? And then we'll open it to the public. Okay, I'm going to open it up to the public. Thank you, Mr. Foley.
John Anderson, 1880 Spring Mountain Road. I am your stop sign. I gave you folks a drawing of my house, Spring Mountain Court, Spring Mountain Road, where the stop sign would go, and how it personally affects me, my family, and my grandchildren. I think, as Ms. Koberstein very wisely pointed out, all it takes is one car at that stop sign to make it impossible to back out of my driveway. 2 cars blocks my driveway. Now, I'm not a traffic engineer. I just simply did this quickly this afternoon. But I don't know if anybody's even thought about this. Nobody certainly informed us that any of this stuff was being considered, and I'm sure you're probably not required to. But we live there. We know what the traffic patterns are. And I can, I'm just being a problem, but boy, I hope you have $2 million in your budget to buy my house, because it becomes useless when I can't leave my own property or turn into my own property. Now, as for stop signs and their effectiveness, we were ecstatic when that stop sign was put in coming down the hill. I have had 2 cars totaled by people running that stop sign, one of which I was in it at the time. So people don't pay attention to stop signs. They're going to blow it the same way they blow the one coming south. You might want to talk about where you might put in a crosswalk. That's wonderful. I want my grandchildren to be able to cross the street. But I don't want to have to give up all of my rights as a property owner to do it. And I don't think that's fair. And I don't think that's what you're intending. I know there have to be other things that can be done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, I live on Hillview Place. I'm about a block away from where this whole issue is taking place, and I personally would really like to thank the city for finally taking action and looking at this. On sunny days, I try and walk up to Beaver Road, where the reservoir is, almost on a daily basis, and I'm telling you, naturally it's worse during the commute time, but there are people coming down that road 45 miles per hour all the time, and it's just it's a bad hazard. And as I just asked and confirmed with the chief of police, the signs that we currently say are on the road say it's radar enforced. And I've talked to at least 4 or 5 officers over the last 6 or 7 years, and they've all told me that the difficulty in setting up a police car on that road and being able to do radar enforcement is next to impossible because there's no place to park. So I'm glad we're looking at it, but I don't know that what we're doing is enough to really satisfy the hazards that we're looking at there. I'm not the only person who walks up that road. I know there's 7 or 8 other residents that like to do the same thing I do because it gives you a little bit of a cardio workout getting up that hill. And, can't afford to go into the Meadowood Country Club spa, so I'll just keep doing this. Thank you. Like jump in the reservoir every once in a while on a hot day. Anyway, thank you very much. Okay?
Thank you.
I'm Anthony McKelly, 1125 Cornella. I met last year with the city manager in front of the south side of the RLS on Hillview. A lot of these speeders that come down Spring Mountain Road don't go down Spring Mountain Road to Madrona because the lady on the corner has shrubbery about 8 feet in the air and you can't see down Madrona, which is a violation of our city code, which I don't know if the city has sent her a notice and said, get that shrubbery down to 42 or 44 inches, what the code requires, so you can see around that corner. And because those people cannot see around that corner, they turn on Hillview, down by in front of the RLS. Mark saw that children were trying to cross the intersection, almost getting hit. Same thing on that corner. That owner has shrubbery 8 feet in the air. So the people coming up Oak Street can't see around and see those students that there's a crosswalk right there. So a lot of this problem, a kid is going to get run over eventually. It's going to happen. If we don't get these owners on corners so you can see around them, and try to get those people on Spring Mountain Road to go straight down to Madrona instead of cutting through on the school. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hi. Steve Carlin. I live at 2261 Boyson Lane. And I first want to thank the chief, and I want to thank Erica and Mark for really taking this matter seriously. I'm sure a lot of things cross their desk. And it's been about... We moved to Boyson Lane a couple of years ago and have noticed the speed of traffic on Spring Mountain Road, just as you leave Dean York Lane. And a lot of people do use that walk up to the reservoir, and a lot of people ride bikes up there. And there's no sidewalk, which we don't want, but we do want to see the traffic calm down along that road. And I was the one that actually called the chief and asked him to come out during the commute hour between 5:30 and 6:30, and they stopped 50 cars within that 1 hour period over a 2 to 3 week period. I don't know exactly how long it was, but they gave out a lot of citations. This is a serious problem, and someone's going to get hurt, and it's something that I think we can do something about. And there are means available to us. There's a lot of good ideas. I totally understand what John's talking about the stop sign. But there are other things that we can do along that street that can slow traffic down and make it a lot safer for people to walk on that road. Thank you for paying attention to this. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mike Chiswick, and I live on Boyson Lane as well. And I just like to reiterate, first of all, thanks to the chief. The police have been great in helping us out, and we really appreciate that. And also, I just want to say, I would like a sidewalk, but there isn't a sidewalk between Boyson Lane and the city. So you have to walk on the street if you're going to walk, and it's dangerous. And we really appreciate consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark Smithers, Vallejo Street, clear on the other side of town. I want to congratulate everybody that is helping the folks off of and contiguous to Spring Mountain Road and trying to solve their problem. I would like to suggest, though, that maybe you put just as much energy and just as much efforts into dealing with the whole South Crane right around the primary school area, right where, between Grayson, the Little League fields, the tennis courts, Vallejo Street. We've been asking, I think you guys have been working on this for 6 months. I think we've been working on it for 120 months. About 10 years we've been asking people to deal with the speeding situation there. We call up on a regular basis. Enforcement is, sometimes yes, sometimes no. Everything they're saying, and I think we've got it multiplied times 10. We have a primary school with little kids running across, trying to cross from one side of the street to the other side of the street. There's no crosswalks once you get south of Grayson Street, but there's people running across the street there. We have Crane Park Little Leaguers. We have tennis camps. We have, probably just as many walkers and bikers that they have there. We have them, down on South Crane. We recently had an accident at Vallejo and South Crane. So we've been wondering when a kid's finally going to get hit crossing there. So, the speeding is a problem. I think the stop sign issue, I get that. I've heard about that. And, we've talked about how to deal with the traffic coming into town. We've asked for there is a speed, light that comes in. We've asked for one going out because just as much as when people leave the stop sign at Grayson Street, they take off like a rocket. We've provided all kinds of data, over the 10 years that we've been dealing with this. I really do encourage you to revisit the fire code speed bump issue. We've all been around. There's all kinds of places where they have speed bumps that slow the traffic down, but allow fire trucks to fly right through them because of how they develop them. Because how wide the fire trucks are, you can set them up so that the wheelbase can go through, but it's wider than a car, so the car has to slow down to get through speed bumps. And are they speed humps versus bumps? Rumble ruts are terrible. Those would be worse noise for you than the stop sign and people speeding away. But I really don't want to derail anything that's happening on Spring Mountain Road. I encourage you guys to solve their problem, and I'm asking you to come to South Crane and try and solve our problem too, because we've been asking for a real long time, and we've got a lot of kids over there that don't pay much attention to cars and run back and forth across streets and are standing there. I mean, I've seen kids, where they're waiting for the bus and on a windy spring day and a paper flies out of their hand and they just go running after the paper, irregardless of whether there's a road there or not. So it is a problem waiting to happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
I live on the corner of Spring Mountain and Spring Mountain Court. I've been there for 46 years, so I've really watched the traffic, and it gets worse all the time. But I agree with everything John said. I think a stop sign is not a good idea. And I have a petition from the neighbors.
Oh, I think, do you want to take it to Cindy, our city clerk? Thank you. Thank you. Is there any further public comment on this? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment. Are there any comments from the council?
Oh, yes. This is a really dangerous part of town, and it was really. May I have an extended?
Absolutely.
I thought it was really interesting to hear also from Mr. McKelly about Spring Mountain Road in Madrona. As people may know, I ride my bike around town quite a bit, and that is one section where I'm riding back home on Madrona where I always have to watch the cars coming from Santa Rosa swinging into our lovely town, and nobody stops at that stop in the proper way. They're always halfway out onto Madrona Street. It's really bizarre. But just looking at this map here, and to me, it seems to me the problem is incoming rather than outgoing. But I just wonder if there's something sort of further up the road. I mean, we've had friends living on Dean York Lane or up Dean York Lane, and they would not let their kids walk to school at RLS because there is no sidewalk on Spring Mountain Road. And they would, drive their kids to RLS, 10 seconds away. It's a very scary place. I'm sort of surprised that some of the public speakers actually walk to the reservoir because to me that's super frightening. I just wonder if there's something, looking at our city map, once the Spring Mountain Road gets into town, is there something else that we can do that sort of mandates or enforces or... I know also, we do have a policy that we're trying to encourage sidewalks, and we're doing one on, I think it's Hudson, right? Hunt, sorry. So I just wonder if there could be some, if you put sidewalks, or if you put a sidewalk on, so sort of medium term, longer term, that would be a way to slow down the traffic. I just wonder if there's something that we can do to sort of have a 15 mile per hour instead of 25. These rural people think they're rural roads, but it's really well developed. And to me, a stop heading out of town makes less of a difference, although I do like the idea of putting in a proper crosswalk. That's it.
Ms. Chateau?
I like the idea of a crosswalk. A sidewalk sounds like a great idea, but I don't know how we go about that. I wondered if that could be brought back to the Sustainability Committee, since that's something that they're looking at the whole town. I also think that we do need to look at the whole town when we're thinking about this traffic problem. It's one of the problems that I hear the most about. I know kids also have a hard time crossing that live, in that Hudson, that community that's right next to the primary school, then going to the elementary school. Because a lot of times parents are giving them independence for the first time and wanting them to be on their bikes, and they can't cross over on that. I think it's Spring Street past the cemetery, if I'm saying that right. So I just think it's something to look at broader. Would be great for our town if we can.
Marianne, any additional comments?
The only other thing I would add about the stop sign is noise. Right now, cars proceed through there to go out of town, and the fact of stopping at the stop sign and then revving your car up and moving on in the traffic, I think is also a noise issue. I would say no stop sign. We can continue to look at it if it becomes warranted in the future, but I just don't think it's a good idea.
Can we say no stop sign, but we do a crosswalk, and we do a crosswalk?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
I think there should be a crosswalk. There should maybe, I leave it up to the chief and Erica, maybe something indicating pedestrian crossing ahead.
Do we need flashing lights for that crosswalk? I mean, how bad is it?
I would highly recommend that. If it's an uncontrolled intersection, you're asking for trouble putting a crosswalk across there.
Okay.
Without proper notification, knowing some of the speeds that have been exceeded out there, I would caution against it. Without, as you say, the rapid reflective beacons, and also in addition with sidewalks, we don't own outright the right of way along Spring Mountain Road. It extremely narrows as we go out of the city into the, I guess, extend beyond the urban limit line. That's why there's no sidewalks indicated on the general plan for that area, because properties have, if you've seen the stairway, right as you go in the first curves, there's a stairway right down to the edge of pavement, and then they own the garage because the property, deeded property, goes across Spring Mountain Road. So just something to keep in mind, that it's private property ownership on either side. The hard line, though, is prescriptive easement, because we have our street signs in that shoulder area, the limited shoulder area as you go out of town. But
Mr. Foley, do you have additional comments? Oh. Mr. Knudsen, were you?
Yeah, I'm just really curious about sort of Hillview. Isn't there a crosswalk at Hillview? But I'm sort of pulling it up on the map without a stop. Mm-hmm. Hillview and Spring Mountain. Yeah, Ms. Smithies, you can see there's no stop here. There's stop for Hillview, but there's no stop for Spring Mountain at Hillview, and yet we have crosswalks there.
it's a semi-controlled intersection. It's not a mid-block crossing, which Spring Mountain Court is in Spring Mountain.
So even though there are 2 stop signs out of 3 directions, so there's a stop sign. There's a stop sign coming down the mountain from Spring Mountain. There's a stop sign at Spring Mountain Court. There's just simply not a stop sign heading out of town. So 2 out of 3 stop signs.
Correct. We also have a flooding issue on the corner of the southwest corner, which we need to address with storm drainage. We also have occasions where folks have rolled through the stop sign going southbound, as one of the residents have also stated as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people... Yeah, rolling through stop signs is a problem, but it seems like we've got to come up with some solution, and maybe the stop sign the other direction isn't the right solution, but it seems like there has to be something to improve pedestrian safety between our town and the reservoir, and it is city streets, even though it's quite narrow. I mean, is there some striping we could do that would drastically. You know, I know when I walk out or run out of town on Spring Street up to White Sulphur Spring, I mean, you know, there's, you know, pedestrians, and that's not a very active street. And so, but there is some markings, and I mean, is there something, I don't know, I'm sort of at a loss.
It seems to me that coming up with the exact plan is, you know, looking at other towns, looking at precedent for what works in other areas. I think if there's additional public comment, if it can be submitted after, because I don't think we're going to come to any decisions tonight on exactly what this is.
I just didn't know if the city knew. The city has a grant to build sidewalk all the way around the RLS on the east side of Spring Mountain Road. So if you put that sidewalk there and you put a crosswalk up there by Spring Mountain Court, kids could walk across the street on a sidewalk, walk all the way down Spring Mountain Road on the east side with a sidewalk. That's a grant the city has, and I just didn't know if the city knew you have that grant to build that sidewalk. I was told that last year, I think, by Mr. Petrovich.
So my thought is that
There was a discussion of a grant, but we don't have a grant this time for sidewalk.
So overall, I think, you know, we've got a situation in this town with speeding happening all over town. We're hearing it. I'm hearing it on, you know, from Kearney, from Pratt Street, South Crane, this area. So it's a cultural issue. It's part of what's going on. I remember in Marin about 15 years ago visiting friends, spending time down there and seeing a shift in the culture, and the acceleration of the pace of life had created dangerous situations. I think we're at a point here where we're a small enough town, we're still rural enough that we can try to get a little bit of a control of it by looking at mitigation measures. Oh, Mr. Full, yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but just wanted to bring to your attention one of the goals, I guess, that the police department and Public Works has is to have some actual traffic calming meetings, and we're going to plan those in the near future, so it should hopefully address a lot of the things that you're concerned with.
Yeah, so if we're looking at it, that this isn't just a one intersection issue, this is a town-wide issue, and what are the traffic calming measures that make it safer for people to walk, to bicycle? I know for me that the idea that a kid riding their bicycle in a town is an indication that it's a safe town, it's a town that's doing something right by keeping that very, you know, frankly, very delicate entity safe as it moves through town. So if we look at this broadly, what are traffic calming measures that are used in other countries, other cities, what would work here, and how do we look at the different areas they would go? I do also agree that maybe looking at some type of speed bumps that would work with fire engines. I've seen speed bumps in other cities. I do also agree that a stop sign at that point on Spring Mountain is most likely not a good idea, and I think it's been made very clear why. So I think moving away from any stop sign issue and looking at traffic calming measures. I did hear from one resident up in the Spring Mountain Boyson area that if there's an ability to clear some of the vegetation on the side, it may open up a little bit more of a walking path or a safer walking path. I do think that working with the county, this might be an excellent opportunity for a project that where our jurisdictions meet to come up with something we can work on together, and that will have benefits in many ways that the next project we work on, we have the lines of communication open. So for the Spring Mountain project, I think definitely having a conversation with the county saying, how do we slow it down before it even gets to the city limit? And looking at that reservoir, that whole walking area with striping or traffic calming measures. But with the idea that we're not just looking there, but what could work around the whole town, and these other, you know, the other entrances to our town. The South Crane is a great example of that. People are coming into town with a certain mindset. They're in a hurry. How do we change that and make safety supersede being in a hurry, and the safety of the kids and you know, adults as well, but the kids around the schools, et cetera. So to me, starting to change the culture by an overall approach would be great and moving forward as quickly as we can on the specific areas.
So where are we on the crosswalk?
Well, I think what we're supposed to do here is discuss and provide direction.
Okay.
My suggestion is that you proceed with the whole program, with the exception of the stop sign, and that the staff develop whatever you think is the most appropriate crosswalk, if it's one of those lighted things like over on Charter Oak. Is that what you're thinking of? Where the lights are in the pavement?
I would steer away from the pavement lights for maintenance reasons, but the overhead reflective beacons.
Yeah, I mean, whatever you think works. And further to that, I would ask that you do look into this issue of the people who are cutting down Hillview to avoid the Madrona intersection. And that we look into enforcing our ordinance regarding visual obstructions at intersections.
I forgot to mention, we did address those earlier this year. The Hillview has meeting requirements, Hillview and Oak, that corner. They are very set back, and they are within the 25, they're well without, way they're angled in the outside of the crosswalk or the sidewalk. They're outside the visibility triangle, so their privet hedge is not within that triangle visibility, but we are adding radar signs on Oak and Hillview for alerting traffic to not go exceed the 15 mile per hour speed limit during when school are present, or 25 miles per hour. And then we did do we did address the all-way stop analysis on Madrona earlier or late last fall. And the warrants weren't met there either.
So you have the direction to move forward?
Yes.
Do we need to vote, or are we just giving direction here? Let me see.
Yes, that sounds great.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I think, do we need to take a break? Or are you just going to grab? Okay. Thank you. Okay, we are going to move, thank you. We're going to move to item 10.4. This is consideration of approval of one or more of the following options. One, a resolution rejecting all construction bids for the C82 downtown restroom project. Two, recommend award of the construction contract to RO Construction and authorize a budget transfer in the amount of $321,570 from the general fund reserves. Oh, excuse me, folks. If you want to have a conversation, if you could have it out in the hall, please.
And while they're moving out, maybe it'd be a time to revisit the agenda order and see if we can make some accommodations for those who are remaining.
Okay. Do you have a suggestion?
Bringing up the RSO ballot question right now would be a good time. I see a lot of people in the audience.
Okay. With that, I will do that. If there's no objection on the council. Okay. So we're going to move to the item number. Where are we? 10.8. This is 10.8, consideration and adoption of a resolution. One, calling a special election to be held on June 4th, 2019. Ordering a submission to the electors of the city a referendum pertaining to Ordinance 2018-9, Mobile Home Rent Stabilization Ordinance. 3, requesting that Napa County provide election services with full reimbursement by the City of St. Helena. 4, authorizing the City Council or designee to file a written argument. 5, directing the City Attorney to prepare an impartial analysis. And 6, authorizing the filing of rebuttal arguments. This is going to be, was prepared and is going to be presented by Mr. Brown.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Council, ladies and gentlemen. This is fairly familiar to the council. We were here 2 weeks ago to discuss the fact. I'll provide a very, very brief background to remind members of the audience, unless the council directs otherwise. On November 27 of 2018, the City Council adopted the Rent Stabilization Ordinance, Ordinance number 2018-9, adding Chapter 9.24 to the Municipal Code to establish a mobile home rental stabilization program within the city of St. Helena. On Wednesday, December 19, the city received a referendum petition. The city clerk determined that the petitions met the prima facie check for the requisite number of potentially valid signatures. The county registrar of voters, Mr. Tudor, validated the signatures. The upshot of it was that the referendum petition was valid, and the city council was therefore faced with a mandatory obligation to take one of two actions: either to repeal the RSO, or alternatively to schedule an election within the limits imposed by the Elections Code, the time limits and otherwise. At the City Council's last meeting on February 12, the council gave us direction to go ahead and prepare the paperwork necessary to schedule this for a June 4, 2019 election. We then turned that around, prepared the resolution and materials that are before you this evening. The draft resolution that's before you was sent to the Registrar of Voters for Napa County, John Tudor, who has approved it as to form. It satisfies his office such that it would properly allow for the calling of the election. There are other matters addressed in the resolution that the council should consider this evening and address. One is whether the city council wants to undertake to draft ballot argument itself as a body, or alternatively to designate one or two of you to work to prepare the ballot argument on behalf of the city council. Both are appropriate, but if the city council wants to meet with a majority of you, then the Brown Act needs to be satisfied, and we would need to schedule a special meeting to do that. In addition, there is, as a matter of Elections Code law, there is in your draft resolution this evening a provision directing my office to proceed with preparation of the impartial analysis that's required for any referendum or initiative measure placed on the ballot. That is an obligation that the city attorney generally undertakes and fulfills independently, with an independent relationship with the electorate. And that's done at the direction of the city council. There was one letter received by the city in response to this item. It was from Ms. Ashley Titus of a law firm in Sacramento, making arguments that the ballot language, the ballot question, which is included in the resolution before you this evening, violates the Elections Code, in the sense that the Elections Code requires that the ballot question itself be non-argumentative and not inducing prejudice either for or against the measure. I received that letter, as did the city council, late yesterday. I did review the cases cited there as well as the statutes. I'm satisfied that the ballot language that we've included in your resolution does not violate the Elections Code, and would be appropriate and would withstand a legal challenge if one were brought, as the letter from the attorney did threaten. However, the city council may wish to consider alternative language that would address the concern raised in that letter. Mainly the concern was with respect to that portion of the ballot question that essentially said that the ordinance was voluntary for those residents who would choose to avail themselves of it. the concern from Ms. Titus in her letter was that that was argumentative and was creating prejudice against the referendum. Again, we've reviewed that, and our analysis and review of the case law suggests that that's not the case. But again, there has been alternative language that's been prepared. Vice Mayor Doring and Council Member Koberstein have worked to create some alternative language which does address, to some extent, the concern raised in the Ashley Titus letter, and that is on the dais before you this evening. Copies have been made available to the public. They are at the table in the back as well. With that, I think it would be appropriate for the council to raise any preliminary questions you might have, then to open this for public comment, and then come back and deliberate on this and give direction, including the adoption of the resolution with either the language that is in your report this evening and in the draft resolution, or with the alternative ballot language that is on the dais and has been made available to the public as well.
Okay, is there any initial council comment?
I have a question. This litigation that is threatened, when is the time that actually must happen if they intend to file something? Does it suspend the referendum? Does it happen after the vote? When?
It would be required to be brought within 10 days of your action this evening.
Is there any expedited way to deal with it, given that we have a date set?
The courts generally handle elections matters on an expedited in an expedited fashion.
Is there any?
I have a question for the attorney, if I may.
Yeah.
Are there legal definitions of just and reasonable return?
There are many cases that have used that as the constitutional standard by which rent stabilization ordinances are judged. The alternative term that's used often is fair return. But just and reasonable is an alternative that seems to be used sort of interchangeably in the rent stabilization cases that are looking at the constitutionality of these ordinances. So I'm satisfied that this language is reflective of that standard that's used by virtually all of the court cases.
Is there? I'm going to open it to public comment. Is there any public comment at this point?
Well, I feel I have to bring this to your attention. I don't know what the timeline is on this. It's slightly different, but it does have to do with the resolution. I wanted to let the city attorney know about this. I represent the League of Women Voters. We have a committee, an initiative and referendum committee it's kind of a long-term committee because we're looking into guidelines for the county and cities to follow. We have found over a long period of time that the guidelines aren't really sufficient. There are loopholes that cause things to happen. And so we have a lot to study, and we're not lawyers. Well, actually, a few of us are. Not me, but the committee is. What has come to my attention, I have asked Mr. Tudor about and have not received an answer back. So because this is on the agenda tonight, I feel I need to put you on notice. And that is, and I want to say that I do live in the mobile home park, but I am not for or against. We are very neutral in this particular issue. What's come to our attention is that the signature gatherers did exactly what this letter says, was not impartial, and gave out arguments against the ordinance. And what we have heard from several people who signed the petition is that the signature gatherers who did get $10 per signature said, well, you need to sign this because people in Vineyard Valley want this. They want this ordinance. And we can gather testimony to this effect. So my question to John Tudor was, if we show there is misrepresentation in gathering signatures enough so that it could make the difference, does that invalidate the referendum? What are the guidelines here? So I will attempt to speak with you tomorrow or sometime that's convenient. But I did want to bring it to your attention because I guess my request would be, while investigating this and checking with the registrar and maybe certainly investigating these, what we've heard, does that invalidate the referendum? If so, I assume, as in many cases, initiatives, people have to go back and do it again. But how can we prevent that in the future? And for this evening, is there enough time to hold deciding whether to put this on the June 4th ballot? Can you wait for another city council meeting to see what has evolved?
So I'll ask Mr. Brown.
The question's a very good one, and it's one that arises in connection with both referenda and initiatives frequently. The short answer is that the city election official, as well as the county election official, has a ministerial obligation under the Elections Code to do certain things to process both initiatives and referenda. And unless there is an inconsistency or violation with the Elections Code that's basically apparent on the face of the either the petition itself or some other materials that are presented to the election official for processing under the Elections Code, the elections official really has no ability or discretion to invalidate those, to undertake any fact-finding to try and determine whether there have been misrepresentations made during the signature gathering process or not. How that is dealt with is something that I can say in a very general way that is the subject usually of either a pre-election or a post-election challenge to the referendum, such that and I have to be a little careful not to start giving advice because to members of the public who might be interested in challenging the election. But generally, that's how concerns such as those of the speaker are raised. They would consult their own lawyer, and they would address whether either a pre-election or a post-election challenge would be appropriate. The courts are generally suspicious of pre-election challenges. They generally don't like to interfere with the election itself. I'm not in a position to give that advice to the speaker, however. It's also a question that the city council can also consider itself if information were to come to your attention that warranted some investigation and fact-finding. That as a basis for invalidating an election is also something you can consider. That's not before you this evening. The only thing before you properly this evening is setting this for the election on June 4.
Okay. Well, I realize that, but I did want to bring it to your attention in case it might help you decide whether to decide now or later. And we would not be hiring lawyers. We're interested in the process. That's really what we're doing. So you're telling me that there is no guideline on this. I mean, we will probably recommend that signature gatherers can only read the summary, end of story. And just you know, it's pretty obvious. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay.
Just while the
Yes.
speaker is coming to the microphone, I would also mention too that just as a reminder to the city council that if time is of the essence to you in getting this on the ballot for June, your time to do that is running now, and unless you were to schedule a special meeting within the next, I believe, week, you wouldn't be able to get this scheduled for the June 4 election, which we're told by Mr. Tudor is one of the 2 dates available in June. I know that there had been concern articulated by members of the public and members of the council about pushing too close toward the end of June with because of the fact that some leases may be coming to their term by the end of June, and there was some concern about the 10-day effectiveness date of the RSO, et cetera, to try and the notion being that time is of the essence if you want the RSO to become effective before leases would be in jeopardy to some extent.
Okay, thank you.
Pat Dale, 25 San Juan. I have a question. Mrs. Orsini referred to the fact that there should be some kind of regulation causing the petitioners to only read the summary and not, make their commentary on the summary. It would sure be great if we could see that summary. We don't know what the petitioners were taking around town. Good, I'll get it from her. I will tell you that I also have spoken to several people who confirm what Mrs. Orsini said. And I just want to make a quick comment about whether or not you change this language, the voluntary to the opt-into. I think either one would work, and I bow to your wisdom. I'm not going to advise, but I can tell you that I worry that if you give in to this LLC that owns Vineyard Valley, that they will constantly threaten to sue you every other day.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Any closed public comment? Any comment or input from council at this point?
Again, it would be appropriate for you to decide how you want to have, whether you want to authorize a ballot argument, and if so, how you'd like to do that. I think for recent measures, you might have delegated that either to the mayor or to the mayor and I think it might have been Councilmember Doring. But in any event, that would be one approach that might be efficient for you rather than calling a special meeting.
Okay, yeah. So let me ask this: the new language that was created, has that been run by the lawyer who sent the letter in? Have they looked at the second version?
No, we did not run that by them. We only received. I got their letter shortly after midnight last night, so we haven't done that. Nor did they invite us to do that in the letter. So I think the concern. I would let Vice Mayor Doring and Councilmember Koberstein speak for themselves, but I think there's been some concern or some intent to try and simply avoid the issue. And create something that addressed the issue that they raised in the letter. And in my view, either version would satisfy the elections code.
Okay. Is it worth running it by that other attorney to see? No.
I think the question, is it worth it just to try the second one to see if that's a better outcome?
Mr. Knudsen, any thoughts?
Vice Mayor Doring and Councilmember Koberstein did a great job. So it seems to me we're ready to vote on setting the election, are we not?
I'm comfortable with that.
I think the other point was whether we intend to have a ballot argument, and then who would the council designate members to do that?
Do you and Ms. Koberstein, after working on this, feel that you could summarize that as well? Is that asking too much? Is it?
I'm happy to do it. I assume we get a little guidance on the limits of our argument, right?
I think it would be appropriate for you to work with the city manager. There's nothing inappropriate about that. It is a task for you as a body and as a city council as the body, but certainly the practice, I think, statewide is that input from your professional staff would be appropriate.
The other issue that you'll need to consider is whether who signs the ballot argument. So if you're delegating responsibility to a member or two, it would also include the expectation that they would help recommend who would sign that ballot argument, and it may not be all 5 members of the council. Alternatively, all 5 members of the council could sign the ballot argument. So that's a decision of the council on how you would like to address that.
And that needs to be made this evening.
That decision should be made this evening. Otherwise, you would have to schedule a special meeting and come back and make that decision. So it's teed up for you to give that direction and make that decision this evening.
Okay.
A point of question. So the ballot argument can't be made by collectively the St. Helena City Council?
Yes, you could designate 2 members to write on behalf of the city council, or 1 member to do that.
But I think he's saying, how would the signature look on that kind of a situation? Would it be the entire council that is supporting the argument, or do you actually need a signature of individuals? I mean, that may not be your question, but that's my question.
I actually don't know the answer to that. I'd need to look that up.
So the council can decide to have all 5 of you sign this. It doesn't mean that the council with 4 or 3 or 2 would not also have the opportunity to state a position, if I understand the context of this election appropriately.
I'm sorry, say that.
Even with 2 members signing a ballot measure, and there are 3 additional members of the public that sign the ballot measure, so there are a total of 5 slots available for signature, the council can still take a position on a measure.
Yes, and what I was envisioning when we were drafting this resolution was that the council would designate the drafting to the 2 members, but all 5 would simply accept what was drafted by the subcommittee of 2.
And I believe that is one option available to the council. I believe there may be a second option, which would include if the council had an interest in having others besides council members sign on to the ballot measure. No, it's only these 5 in this case. Okay. Other types of ballot measures have options related to that.
My understanding is it's the council.
Okay, and that would also include the rebuttal argument then? Okay.
So
it's complicated.
Does it require that all 5 agree, or does it come with a majority?
You would be, so before you this evening is the option to delegate the task of drafting, but that's true delegation. Once you've delegated that, you're simply signing. Then you're signing whatever is produced by your subcommittee.
Let me just ask this: Does a member, just theoretical, but does a member who perhaps doesn't want their name on it have the ability to not have their name on it if they don't agree to it?
I don't know the answer to that. I would need to look into that.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Just so that each council member still had the freedom to decide whether they wanted their name on it or not.
It's a great question.
Okay.
I don't know that answer offhand.
But we could make progress with designating the writers.
I guess I'm actually super comfortable having the City of St. Helena Council collectively, I don't know, I can't speak for my other new member of the council, I think individually it's a little, there's more questions about it, because then is it the St. Helena City Council, or is it the individual members, or is it members as the city council? I mean, it's sort of.
So if we sign it as the council, with not our separate names, but as the city council,
To me, that's what one would do. But
voted by a majority.
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe that there are signature spaces for each council member to sign.
Yes, they don't physically sign,
Right.
they're listed.
But they're listed, right. And I think that the direction this evening would be that if you're authorizing a city council argument, that decision will be done tonight. So your name will appear on the ballot. I believe that's the case.
And, I mean, is everybody on the council comfortable with that? And if there's somebody that isn't, first of all, I'll ask if everybody's comfortable with that. Because if somebody's not, then I think we need to make.
I think we should have a city of St. Helena council argument. I mean, I think that's entirely appropriate.
But it sounds to me as though it has to list our names individually.
Well, because we're on the city council.
Right.
But we're signing, presumably, as the city of St. Helena council, not as individual citizens, presumably.
But do we have agreement with all five of us?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay, so
Yes.
we do then. Okay, so, and I just want to make sure everybody knows there's the freedom to not, if that's the way they want it to go. But it looks like we have agreement with the five, so,
I'm comfortable designating either Paul or Mary or the vice mayor or the council member together or individually. I don't think need to have a special meeting and come back and analyze text.
I don't either, in my opinion.
Agreed.
So I think we're clear on that. So this is the recommendation is to call a special election to be held on June 4th, 2019. I think we're all agreed on that. Orders the submission to the electors of the city a referendum pertaining to Ordinance 2018-9, Mobile Home Rent Stabilization Ordinance. 3, requests that Napa County provide election services with full reimbursement by the city of St. Helena. 4, authorizes the city council or designate to file a written argument. So that's what we're going to designate, Mr. Doring and Ms. Koberstein. Directs the city attorney to prepare an impartial analysis and authorizes the filing of rebuttal arguments.
Well, it would be both the the argument, your principal argument against the referendum and in favor of the ordinance, as well as a rebuttal argument against the contrary position that may or may not be filed.
Okay. And so, are we ready for a motion to move this forward?
Yeah, I would move that we adopt the recommended action 1 through 6, designating Vice Mayor Doring and myself as the drafters.
Is there a second on that?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Koberstein.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring.
Yes.
Councilmember Chateau.
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes.
Mayor Ellsworth.
Yes.
And if new information comes up regarding the signatories, that would be interesting to see whether we can adjust. I don't know if we can or need to adjust that, whether it's all council members required or the council. I don't know how you do that. Be interesting.
Shall we move on to our next in the interim?
Hang on just a sec. Okay. So we're going to move on now to 10.4, which is consideration of approval of one or more of the following options. This has to do with the downtown restrooms. 1, a resolution rejecting all construction bids for the C82 downtown restrooms project. Or 2, this is consideration of approval of one or more of the following options. 2, recommend award of the construction contract to RO Construction and authorize a budget transfer in the amount of $321,570 from the general fund reserves to the Civic CIP fund to complete the project. 3, direct staff to explore a building kit or modular building option and bring back to City Council Planning Commission for review and approval. 4, place the project on hold and reevaluate once other private venture public restrooms are online for 6 months. This is prepared by Ms. Smithies, the Public Works Director.
Yes, so the staff report in front of you has the items as you clearly outlined below. We had very high bids once again. As you know, we had bids of just about a little bit over, about 8,000 over this in September, and we rejected all bids in October, hoping that with the different climate, in the middle of winter, when construction's a little bit slower, it would help things along, and the bids only came in slightly reduced from the original bid. When calling the contractors, the low bidder gave me a breakdown of his construction. You know, the site work alone is about 150 or 135. It varied from bidder to bidder.
May I interrupt? I apologize for this, Mr. Mayor.
It's okay, certainly.
It occurred to us in the aftermath of the last item on the RSO election, we want to be sure that the record does reflect that the motion also was calling to adopt the alternative ballot question language proposed by Vice Mayor Doring and Councilmember Koberstein.
Okay.
And there no further action, but it would be important and appropriate for the record to reflect that was, in fact, the action taken.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I appreciate it. Okay, so we'll move back to this.
So when I saw the breakdown from the contractor, it was very alarming that we had called out some of the issues were sustainable materials. We also had a block pattern that had 8 different patterns and colors associated without a plan in place on the architectural plans that showed how would they lay those sites so they could actually order the correct amount of each one of those identified patterns. And because there's 8 different blocks, so imagine without a plan in front of you, they're going to have to try to calculate overages or underages so they would bid higher, hoping that they can get the right amount. And then the Caldwell, which was the steel roofing and the little overhang that was showed in the shade structure, that material alone was $65,000. That's not an installation cost. That's another $40,000, and you factor in the installation or profit margin, you're looking at over $100,000. So there were some fixed cost items that were called out on the design that I think pushed us over the edge on this item. There's also site considerations. There was 4 additional lights installed in the parking lot. And there was also about $40,000 to $60,000 worth of utilities to bring it to the site. And I found out after the fact that we could have our own staff do that. They said, well, we could help with that. So that would cost about $40,000 in savings on that portion of work. Regardless of what direction we go to, modular, no project, with the project, whether it's modular, rentals, or fixed structure, we will have to bring utilities to the site, whether we do them or contractors. So that's a $40,000 given that we could probably take away just materials alone and have our staff bring the sewer and water main to the site. There will be some electrical work still required, but at least we could take care of our own utilities to get them there. And lighting, if we do need lighting out there, as there were some suggestions at the steering committee last week and by members of council, that why don't we include this with the streetscape design package, at least maybe identify some of the lights or other treatments that were identified in the architectural plans. When we looked at doing the value engineering, was a bit dismayed by the California legislation or code. If we do value engineering and we have $100,000 savings, up to 50% of that goes to the contractor. So that's not really helpful to us. If we can cut some corners and save on cost of materials, then they get half of the savings. So with that, and hearing some feedback from council after we got the second bid opening, looking at modulars or even revisiting the ROMTech kit or a kit package, and one of them that was brought to Planning Commission, I think over a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, originally when this came in. They may not have had the ability, up on the screen above you is exterior options. I don't know if Cindy can scroll down. There's so many options out there that you can do with a kit or shielding. I actually, the day of the bid opening and the amount of the cost and my experience with Romtech in my prior agency, I sent them the plans, and within 2 weeks they turned around this rendering, no cost, trying to mimic the mimic may not be the good word, but match what was done recently by an architect locally, based on the Renaissance plan provided in 2015. And this package right here would be about $75,000, and they estimate about 1.5 times to 2 times that to construct it on site, and that puts us still close to the $300,000 range. Maybe below it, but I'm getting conservative here with the climate of all the fires and the demand of contractors. Maybe this is not the way to go. And then we've had reached a vendor called Exalu who's been calling us. That's another flash file on here. If our city clerk could scroll down, which is a modular option. I believe they are the same one or similar to the one that was installed in downtown next to Downtown Joe's on Main Street and the Bounty Hunter. A Napa Valley roasting block between 1st and 2nd Street. This is a modular building, but it can be permanently set. But if anything were to change, has also a lot of options on the exterior. If you can scroll down. Cindy's great. There's a 2-stall restroom. And I believe there's another page. Is that the last page? There's a page with all these different exterior designs, artwork. Just since we were on our presentation before, maybe it's something that we activate Money Way and the parking lot. And if anything were to happen to the parking lot in the future, if it gets developed, this modular unit could be picked up and moved elsewhere. That's one of the beauties of this kind of unit that we would own. And then today I got some flyers about renting modulars. Still, we'd have the cost of bringing the utilities to the site. We'd also need to include the electrical.
What is the cost again of owning the modular?
That was what was amazing. I haven't been able to reconnect with them. The vendor, since I think he was away on vacation or on a sales trip. Actually, he was out of the country. $116,000 to $160,000 for that building. The 116 to the 160 is the different options they have available. And then, just as a ballpark, he threw 20 to 40 to install.
And then in terms
And I don't believe that meant the utility hookups. It's be similar to our William Scotsman where they brought in the new restroom building, and we would still have to add our own utilities once they got it on site.
And then in terms of rental, was there a cost that they put out?
I did not get a cost, but I would, if we could look at the cost for William Scotsman, I believe that was about $45 for 3 years, or I'd have to revisit the cost. It would be a very similar cost that we did at the Courtyard.
Okay.
So this time we're looking for direction.
Is there any initial comment from, and then I will open up to the public after.
I have a question for the Public Works Director. So the original plan for the super expensive model had some sort of natural airing that would avoid the need for air conditioning in the summer. There was some sort of venting or something, as I recall. In the modular units, is there sort of a venting aspect or not?
I have not delved into it that well. I will want to add, though, when I called Romtech, because when I worked with them in Petaluma, a facility that was a 2-stall cost $26,000. We purchased it outright. We can purchase some of these vendors are through a multiple or consortium, so a public agency consortium, so we could buy them outright and then to either install on our own or with assistance. The Romtech said they have gone up, and the cost of materials have gone up incredibly over in the past 3 years. Because I was kind of sticker shocked when I got this fancy design, and it went from like a $26,000. I was estimating 26 to 35, and it came in at 75. So you can just see there, and within a 4-year time period, they have gone up significantly in price.
Okay. Is there any other comment from council just initially?
I'll wait till.
Okay, I'll open the public comment if there's any comment.
Thank you so much for waiting through all of that.
No problem. I'm here all night. My name is Aaron Trumbull. I'm here on behalf of the board of the Chamber of Commerce, as also a downtown merchant owner, business owner. These bathrooms are something that we've been working towards for, well, 25 years. And being on the ground as a business owner and dealing with people looking for restrooms, I see it happen every day. Literally today, 5 people asked me to use our restroom. And I can choose to allow them to use our restroom if I want them to stay in the store and continue to shop. I can tell you that I've regretted that decision many times. But what we as a downtown community need is something that's close, something that's not a private bathroom like Joel Gott has been willing to offer, which is great, but it's not a permanent solution. And hopefully with the proper signage and a close proximity to downtown, then we won't have that issue of people in businesses with an emergency bathroom situation. They're going to see the sign, they're going to use the restroom as they're walking and they're shopping and they're dining, and it's just not going to be an issue. So what I would like to ask the council is that we move forward with a permanent solution to the downtown restroom situation. And I understand that, with plans for Money Way, and that, was not in place when these plans were originally discussed. So I understand that might need to come into consideration with this restroom project. But if we could make it a priority and a plan going forward, that would be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any comment from council?
I always have comments.
That's because you're sitting in my old chair.
Is that the reason? I've inherited yeah. Aaron brings up a really good question that I've always asked, and I know we've got 2 public restrooms downtown, right? One is on Railroad Avenue, and it's pretty skeegy. The other one's in Lyman Park, which we've just, as a city, renovated. I'm all for more restrooms. I'm just curious as to why the restroom in Lyman Park is not considered by the community as a viable place to send visitors to our town. I don't understand it.
Too far up from the main shops. It really is. That sounds, if we live here, that sounds like that would be crazy. But I think from the retailers, from what I've heard, that's just not. It's not just go down this spot right here and go over to Money Way. It's not the same. And Railroad, I was thinking about that too when I went over there with my interview with Jesse during the campaign. I thought, oh, this is great. It's right here. You walk through the alleyway. And then I walked it with the kids the other night, and I'm like, you go over the train tracks. Not great, to go over the train tracks and to send people over the train tracks. So I think that that's not a great option either. So I think that the first one, it is just too expensive, and there's a way to do it cheaper. I'm really excited by these ways. I don't know how to take it from what we see here to what's real. So I want to be able to have the ability tonight to say we don't do this most expensive one that we're all now saying the design is too expensive. There's questions about if it fits, or all the reasons that you said and more that were presented at the other meeting. But I absolutely want to say to the community the business community that's been trying to get this for 24 years, that we are moving forward and we will get a bathroom. And I would love if the chamber could also meet us and put up a sign in the interim for the bathroom at the chamber, because I talked to Amy and she said that they're all for the public using that, and they're going around to the businesses and making sure the businesses know that just in the interim as we are making it a priority and moving forward. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you.
I think we should reject the bid. obviously. I think it's unconscionable to spend this amount of money on a restroom. You get to build a small apartment for this. I would like to recommend that we put the project on hold, but we send this decision to David and Linda Gates, who are working with us on the streetscape, and have the idea about activating Money Way. I'd like them to look at these options, give some direction as to how they think it may fit into whatever they're going to do there. And maybe they don't think this is the best location. I mean, it does add a lot to the price. Maybe they have other ideas, but I would like to rely on their expertise to help us find the right location and pick the right design that's going to fit in with where we're going generally. I also think I sort of view the bathrooms at the chamber as kind of a permanent thing, not a interim thing. That was sort of what was represented to us when they came to us, was that there would be public restrooms on Main Street. And in talking with Marcus today, Marcus Marquez, the idea is that they would also like to create a map of downtown that highlights locations of various things, including the restrooms, which I think, we should move forward with that. And lastly, I'd like us to investigate whether it is feasible to be directing people to the Carnegie Building where we have restrooms as well. I know there might be some issues there that we don't have people in that building all the time, but I would like us to look into it because there are two restrooms there, I believe. So that's my thought. Oh.
I'll come back.
Well, I do agree that we should reject the bids. They're exorbitant, and it's not something that this community should pay for. I do think we should go forward in the current location with the packaged options that we have and looking at those. I think it is a good point that Gates can provide some interesting information. But I think we need to send the message to the community that we're committed to finishing this project in its current location, and we'll need obviously a lot more information regarding the design, the venting, those kinds of things. But I think if we just kind of send the message that we're going to explore it, it gets off the radar. So I would agree that we need Gates' input to see what they can do, but I think the input doesn't prohibit us from moving forward with the plan with one of the other options, the kit options. Either one, frankly, maybe both. Look at both and see, and then compare them. That's how I would go. Comments regarding the chamber as a long-term use. I'm concerned. One of my concerns is that my understanding is that chamber bathroom is a shared bathroom, and right now it's great because there's not a whole lot of use on the other side, but that is a potential restaurant or a potential business. And do we really want to send the message that, oh, well, that business now is a public bathroom? I think that long term, hopefully we'll get a tenant in there that is operating a business, and they'd be in the same position as all the other tenants going, we'll satisfy our tenants, our customers, but it's not open to the general public. So our citizens who frequent downtown, and it makes sense because we're trying to get energy downtown and more events downtown and pop-ups this. And, when you talk to Gates, they're very excited about bringing people downtown to different areas, and you have to accommodate them with bathrooms that are sort of separate from other businesses. So I think we need to commit to that. But more importantly, we are a town that relies on tourism. And it is not appropriate to have bathrooms that are not really accessible and not close to where the action is. And hopefully we want to have the action downtown. So I respect Mary's comments. I know there are other options, and we definitely need to look at all the options, but I think we need to send the message that we're moving forward on this project. And hopefully if Gates comes back and says, this is going to be a disaster for whatever reason, I will listen to that because they're the professionals and I am not.
Yeah, no, I just agreed with that. I was going to say the same thing about the restaurant being in, or if a restaurant goes in there, that's more demand on the one bathroom. This is more, I think a lot of times businesses get multiple people. Sometimes there's a stroller. It just seems like this is more available for people that are coming in groups to go and use a bathroom and not lose them from the whole shopping experience. That's it.
Thank you. My thoughts are that certainly the bids, I think we should walk away from the construction bids. I think we need to do something as soon as possible. To me, the idea of something temporary, I think having Gates looking at our long-term plan so that the long-term plan for the bathroom is integrated with their long-term presentation, which is going to include community input. But I wouldn't want to make decisions that are going to bump into what they're working on. So my thought is to look at and to do it in conjunction with Gates, but what does it look like to get a temporary unit that we rent for at least this summer that's something that was on par with what GOT had at GOTS. Do you know, did they have to hook up to the infrastructure at GOTS? Okay. And
they have a permanent sewer connection with that temporary restroom.
Okay. And so then we would have to create that hookup. And that may be something that we talk with Gates about. If we do create that hookup for a temporary unit, could it be reused later for something else that would be in the proximity? So the money would go for the temporary use, but then the use could be extended. To me, having something by this summer would be excellent. And if there's a temporary or kit that looks like we could do it by this summer, I think that would send hopefully a signal to the downtown and the merchants that we are listening and want to make this happen.
Are you talking about this one right here, the 160,000?
Well, I was thinking if there's a rental possibility of the Exalu option that I think we were sent earlier, or something like GOTS had that was a temporary structure that we could rent, and we're not purchasing it, just to get through this summer while Gates is designing what the overall long-term plan would be. So we're not buying something we might only use once.
So I'm hearing this, I got direction to do the utility work so we can do something, but also put something in infrastructure and that we can modify to meet the future hookups, which I think we can accommodate. Since we already have a layout plan with the prior design, we'll have to get a hookup out there regardless. We'll lay it once, have it done once, and then if we have to make any modifications for a new structure, that's the least of our problems. It's just getting that infrastructure to that location. I'm not sure if there's going to be any other modifications to the location in the parking lot, pending any other changes in design. We are limited because we're trying to not take any more parking spaces, and we can't encroach into that walkway because then we're hindering ADA access with doorways and such. But for the modulars, I believe William Scotsman, I have to go the numbers. We're probably looking at a minimum for the summer, at least 15 grand, because they're going to bring about 5 grand to bring it on site and then 5 grand to pack it up. And then your monthly rental costs.
Mary, what do you think about doing something temporary? I mean, we would have to invest in getting the infrastructure there, but
looking at, there's mobile units, pretty fancy bathrooms you can rent that you just drive up, but you still need to connect somehow.
Or they pump them out.
Right. My concern with going ahead with this as a permanent location is I really would like Gates to look at the location carefully. It is the one piece of property besides the Carnegie Building that the city owns. It is a long money way, and maybe they have a different idea for how we are going to use that parking lot in terms of activating Money Way, and maybe it doesn't include having it be the site of the public restroom. And maybe if they stroll the street, or maybe on the other side of the street, they might have an idea of a better location. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that deferring the long-term decision to Gates and that project, but coming up with a temporary something for this summer at least.
I don't think it's just the summer. It's pretty busy all fall.
Right, right. But I'm saying by the summer. So if while we're working on the long-term solution through Gates, we're also having a somewhat temporary solution to get us until they show us their plan.
I just would like an idea of the timing with that Gates and sidewalk, because if it's going to be a temporary that's then longer, and we might want to think about the cost when this is not that much more and we get something much nicer that we can use somewhere else.
The other question that I have is for a temporary or even for a permanent. I mean, we have to maintain this. I know that at the GOTS, I mean, they have staff. My son was among them, who's actively cleaning those restrooms frequently, or else it's going to be a bad mark on our town. And I don't know if we've got, have we assigned personnel potentially? What that means, because we shouldn't put it in there if we're not going to have somebody on it, because it'll get skeegy.
What do we do with the restrooms at Lyman Park? Do we have regular maintenance?
So we do, and I'll wait for the Public Works Director to comment on that, but this would have to be one of our highest priority locations and likely addressed on a more frequent basis than the visits that we do and the maintenance that we do at other locations.
I would concur with that. Also, because we do the downtown rounds, we up the rounds that are in the busier times of year. They include the bathrooms in that area.
Would it be worth presenting it to the Gates very soon and saying what do they envision as a temporary solution? They've had experience with these types of things. What about engaging them to help us create the temporary solution until the long-term solution's in place?
I think that's fine.
Okay.
I mean, I don't feel like I'm qualified to look at those and say, okay, let's pick this one or that one. I'd like them to look at this of what can we do immediately, and if there is one that you can pick up and move someplace else, fine. And is this parking lot the best long-term location?
And if it's not the best long-term location, will it work temporarily until we find the best long-term?
Yeah, or is there some other spot? You know, I think, from what I understand, the utilities are the big issue about where it goes. I don't know if, you know, and I don't know that we have anything on the other side of the street that we could consider.
Would it be worth saying at this point the next step is to put it to them to get their input over the next week or two to see what their thought is?
So what I'm hearing is move forward design considerations, refer to Gates for input. We'd also need to get a proposal for them because this is not included in their current scope of work, so we'll get a cost. And then design utilities, meet the location, and work with Gates on the input on that location.
What do you think?
Yeah, that's what I suggested.
Yeah, the other idea, the good thing is that we are going through the whole public process in the next, it's aggressive, the schedule. We're meeting next month, and then there's a follow-up meeting in April. You know, I think in the short term, we'll get some responses, and maybe it's included as a site plan with the public, because we are doing the community outreach.
Okay. So is that enough direction for us here?
I just want to make another plug for the Carnegie Building. Let us know if that's feasible. There's 2 restrooms there. I'm not saying as a substitute. I'm saying
Combination goal has been edited from that workshop, and we've drafted the family and youth goal. Those are phrases that you have not seen before. The others are the same. So goal 2, I'm sorry, goal 3 and goal 5 have been written have been edited and from the workshop on the 4th.
Any comment? Any thoughts on these?
I'm fine with them. Is 5 what you envisioned, Paul? Language?
Yes, I'm okay with 5. participated with Mark in drafting that, so I'm fine with it.
Mr. Knudsen, Ms. Chateau? I am
Okay.
as well.
All right. Next would be to ensuring that the work plan includes the items that you anticipated it would include this year. And beyond that, the prioritization, feedback on the green, blue, yellow, and red.
I had one note on goal 2 with the improve access to housing one. I was just curious about C and D. It seemed like D needed to happen before C. Because wouldn't it be better to look at first how we quantify the need and the target goals, all of that, before we have the Planning Commission review what we should do? Don't we need to first understand everything? Like what the options are?
You know, I think it depends on how you look at it. Some people will say we should commit right now to build 25 units of this and 50 units of that and 75 units of this other. On the other hand, you might ask the question, how are we going to do that? We need to change our regulatory structure to allow certain things to happen in residential zoning districts that aren't allowed now. And so that's why I thought C comes before D. You know, the Planning Commission is going to look at what's in the housing element, look at what's in the white paper, and maybe they will even be participating or attending some of these public engagement strategies. And they'll start working on changes to the zoning ordinance to allow some of these things to happen. And then I think we can start to quantify, you know, in terms of goals, how many things we can build. It's kind of hard to guess when you don't have the regulations in place. You know, I don't know. To an extent, they might be happening at the same time. The only thing I would add under there is on B, I think we're not just updating the fees, we're looking at the ordinance in general to maybe add workforce housing as an inclusionary requirement, perhaps, for some types of development. But I noticed that if you look at goal 4 under A, there we're talking about the impact fee study. I think it's sort of the same thing. I think we've got two.
It is and it isn't. I think that we could potentially fast track the nexus study required for the housing fees and work through either an amendment to the existing contract or a separate vendor for that work.
Okay.
Potentially, that goal could be modified to talk about housing impact fees and the inclusionary housing ordinance. So it talks about it in the revenue structure and then also the regulatory structure.
Does that satisfy? Oh, sorry. Does that satisfy what your concerns
I think
are?
it was just a different approach, and
Okay.
it sounds like maybe they're done together, maybe not, depending on how it goes. Is that what I heard?
And I'm anticipating we're going to need to bring in some consulting services to help move the initiative forward, and we'll want to do that right away. And in consultation with that person or firm, we would be able to seek some additional feedback.
Okay, great.
And I've tried to treat these the goal dates or the due dates as firm dates that we take seriously. But as you'll note, if you look carefully at last year's work plan, sometimes the dates change. And that's why we have a status column included on here so that we could keep track of items that are either on pace or slipping and explain the reason why.
So you think those are realistic, those dates?
Well, They're goals, and
Yeah.
they're goals for us as well. It keeps us focused as staff on a work plan, and sometimes priorities change. And so last year, I half jokingly, suggested that if something was added to the work plan, that the council might want to consider taking 3 items off. And and of course, things come up during the year that we dealt with. A good example last year was, out of left field came this idea for a hotel tax increment, and it added a little bit of work to our plate, and we participated with other cities. So our work plan will evolve, but we do know that when we add items to the list through the year, it will dilute the work plan, and it will take focus off of this, and it will provide pressure on the dates that we initially attempt to work with.
I have a question, Mr. Mayor. City Manager Presswich, do you have staff to work this plan?
And you asked me this question on February 4th, and I said that I felt like we could make a lot of progress, and it may have been helpful to go beyond that and explain that it's an ambitious work plan. I don't want to shy away from it, but I do have some concerns that we won't finish everything on the list in a single year. That's one of the reasons why I'm recommending that in the direction that you've provided to me at the prior workshop, I believe, to add a person to the staff that would be able to work projects. What I anticipate is, I know that we have 2 departments that are significantly impacted by this work plan. It's the Public Works Department and it's the Planning Department. And this assistant to the city manager position, I see as a person that would be able to assist on projects. And they're going to spend a lot of time on planning related projects, including housing and public works related projects, because of all the number of projects that are moving forward. I do think they'll work in different departments as well, but they will spend a lot of time in this area, and that's why I think with the addition of them, it will help us be able to deliver on this plan.
Do we have any other outstanding personnel openings at the moment, or not?
No. So, well, we have, that's true. We lost a contract planner. We have a person that's now working 10 hours a week. So we have a bit of a gap on the planning department.
Is that something that we're actively seeking? Are we looking?
We conducted 3 recruitments and failed to find someone. I think it was somewhat of a fortuitous luck that allowed Christopher Gustin to come work for us. He's excellent and has been very helpful, but he doesn't want to work a significant number of hours. And so I think he's going to help us get through the remainder of the fiscal year. And as we get into the spring, we will start to actively recruit both for that position that the council has funded as an interim, or leaning on consultants. I'm trying to not go with consulting staff right now because the prices, frankly, are outrageous for what they're asking for.
There's a cost issue with consultants.
Yeah, and so we have an allocated budget, but when they charge so much per hour, you get less hours. And then I am looking to, we had an intern and he was excellent, hired for a full-time position with Caltrans, which is great. But we will look to continue the intern position as well in the current budget, the proposed budget, I'm sorry, that'll be coming before the council. And I'm trying to tap into some of the Sonoma State talent or other local folks who are interested in moving and getting some planning experience.
Okay, the other item to mention here is we're going to grow one of our own, and so we're moving an administrative assistant position into more of a planning role, and so this individual will take on some project work that previously was handled by either Aaron or Noah, and so that will take some pressure off. We know that some of the changes last fall with the council's change to single-family home review, downtown permitting has taken a little bit of pressure off. So it will take a little time to, I think, see some of the benefits of that as we move through the projects that are in the queue. But I'm hopeful that with perhaps finding some additional help in the planning department and growing our own, that we'll be able to see a little more relief there.
So anecdotally, by the way, I think the planning department and building, from what citizens have said to me, is you guys are on top of it. So the feedback is the city's being responsive to its citizens that are trying to do planning and building activities. So even though you're short-staffed, it doesn't seem to be affecting our town negatively. So thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate, I have to say, I appreciate city staff and your work, Mark, to hold the line fiscally, as well as be aggressive regarding what we're trying to get done. So it's nice to make progress instead of just spinning wheels. And so I appreciate your focus on dates, date certain, and finishing things and checking them off the list. So thank you.
I'm going to open it to public comment, and then we can get back to any further.
Good idea. I guess I'm the last man standing here. Thank you all, mayors, council members, esteemed staff. I'm here to urge you to put cannabis on the agenda for this year. I know you've got an enormous workload, and I hate to add to it. In the county, the supervisors have shirked their responsibility, and it's going to go to the ballot. We don't want that here. That's not the way to do it. It's supposed to be something that's legislated, that there can be open discussion, there can be public input, and we can get it perfect, as opposed to, you know, our best guess at a ballot initiative. All we're asking for is retail cannabis dispensaries in town. While there is delivery through my company now, you know, it's great for some people, but a lot of people want to go into a store where they can talk to an expert about it. And the closest dispensaries are in Santa Rosa or in Vallejo, which is a really long way for particular elderly citizens to go who aren't comfortable with delivery. So I'd ask you to put on the agenda the Napa Valley Cannabis Association and a couple of us who want to open dispensaries, including Justin Hills and maybe Jeff Hansen as well. We'll work to provide you with a draft ordinance that gets you a lot of the way there, so the staff doesn't have to start from scratch. We've done it at other places. It's worked really well. We can get input from those other cities where we've already worked, and we urge you to put it on the agenda for this year and not put it off, so we don't have to go on the ballot in 2020. Thank you.
Thank you. Any council comment?
About that?
Or anything general?
Yeah, I have a couple comments about Goal 4.
Okay. And
I think you correctly eliminated some things that were already finished, but there was a kind of a lengthy work product in there that included talking to landlords and ultimately led to the Cosmont recommendations. But the last item on that list was to update the zoning ordinance, and somehow it fell out of the list. And I think it's, I'm happy to see investigating the enhanced financing district, but frankly, I don't think they can do it or give us a reasonable recommendation without knowing what the new zoning is going to allow on the various properties in downtown. You get the zoning in place, then they can project what kind of build out there might be, and on that basis, they can figure out whether this financing district makes sense. So I'd just like to get the downtown zoning back in there.
that was supposed to be in there, so that was an oversight.
I would also urge us to move forward on the issue of what we are going to do on Adams Street. It's not on the list either. We had a fairly lengthy presentation by Cosmont, and I don't think we should wait another year to make a decision on it. I think we're going to be informed when we start to see the new long-range financial forecast and we see some of the other projects that need to be done. But I think that should be a work item that we should be working on soon. As far as stretching the staff, I would suggest that this zoning and the whole hotel movement, we continue to work with the Cosmont companies. They understand our downtown issues, and you know, we could work with them. Staff might be busy working with the Planning Commission on the residential side.
Just to add to that, there are some grant opportunities coming up that we're going to be exploring to try to add some additional funds for that. SB2 specifically, there's non-competitive grants for housing that we're going to be looking at getting applications into. So just to be aware that those will be coming in relatively short term that hopefully could add some funds to that.
I would just say I would agree with Mary's last comments.
Any other comments?
No, I just don't know how we're going to get it all done.
Well, we have an amazing staff. We have a wonderful community and a great council, so we'll get a lot done. We'll get a lot done.
I do think there are some things on this goal 4 that could be pushed down, date-wise, or maybe get a color change. I think it is most important for us to focus on the zoning and revenue options and make the decisions that are going to flow from SHAPE, which includes figuring out Adams.
Well, I think looking at the zoning, I think moving forward from what we learned from SHAPE, we don't want to lose that momentum. So I agree.
If you have some specific recommendations, we're happy to note any new yellow or red items that you'd like to transition.
Well, I also think that in terms of the other topics, from a Skunk Works perspective, I think I'm going to try and bubble up the walkability and accessible walking trails open space. And the Parks Department, the Parks and Rec Committee was incredibly enthusiastic, and so there may be some efforts that then lead to some staff time. But I'm comfortable that it's sitting in sort of other topics, just to FYI.
And that's actually something I should mention. And you're going to see work plans coming from the ATSC and the Parks and Rec Committee at the next council meeting on March 12th. A couple of them include some work that isn't included here. And so from a budget standpoint, there are a couple of items that need numbers attached to them. And so we'll be talking about those at our workshop in early May. But you'll see some items on their work plans, and they're advisory bodies to you, and but they're enthusiastic advisory bodies, and I think they're interested in jumping into some of these projects. But there are a couple that are not included here, and what we want to do is make sure that their ambition is aligned with the council, and that's why we're bringing those work plans to you on March 12th.
And I think that's a good point, is that there's a lot of enthusiasm to help and participate. We just have to make sure everything's aligned so that the work is not wasted on their part or inconsistent on our part. So we have a plan.
I'm happy to remove the fire district feasibility from the list for now. I mean, I think we have, we could tackle it next year if we decide it's necessary, but we're talking with Calistoga about some temporary shared arrangement, and that's probably about as much as we can tackle at this point, I would say.
Is that itemized here? Because I thought
It was just a topic. It's on the topic list.
Oh, I see.
I just say we could scratch it off.
And I think also on the financial workshop, I think what we got tonight, the popular annual financial report, goes a long way towards that effort of simplifying or explaining to the community how their financial system works. So if there's an opportunity for that and it's kind of organically comes up, great. But I think we don't need to, put that at the top. But I do think continuing to produce things like this that help clarify it's great.
I think under goal 4, item D and item I are somewhat similar. It's efforts to deal with our vacant spaces, and maybe it is just an online portal. Maybe it's something that talks about, maybe Cosmont can help us along these lines,
There's not too much more to do on the online portal because that just needs some updating with data.
Okay. So does that include like income data on the community and purchasing power and the kind of stuff that a person who is going to start a business might be interested in?
Right. So there's a data. There's some of our reports that, for example, our downtown economic strategy that we would upload. We would want to itemize commercial properties that are vacant and work with our commercial real estate agents to keep those active and put them on this platform. So there's a little bit of just building the website that's needed. It's not a lot of extra work now, but that's the last step to getting that live.
Then I think D is something that, kind of falls out at the moment. However, if we know of a particular building and our help is needed, or we know somebody, I think we should certainly do it, but I don't think that it's a big program that we have to work on between now and September.
How about turning that into a yellow?
Yeah.
I'm just curious about that because I keep getting people asking, what about, the rents being so high? Why aren't you guys talking to owners? Is that something that we do or even have the ability to do?
It is, and I have one of the items in the downtown economic strategy included an idea to convene a working group of merchants meeting with me. So I did have one meeting with them. I'd like to connect them to a stakeholder interview, if you will, with the downtown streetscape project soon as sort of a next step for them. But
this is owners.
I know, and one of the questions I asked of them was, what's your recommendation on how to talk to these landlords? And I'm not sure that we came up with a great solution that day, but I'd like to continue to think about how we might have that conversation longer term.
Is it worth thinking about a working group to look at that issue, the idea of a possible transfer tax or a vacant home tax, or kind of combine these different methods that may come from other cities that have precedent? I don't know if it's worth combining the group to look at a couple different things. It's just a thought.
I don't know if we can do that.
Yeah,
I mean,
those are
a
big
tax,
things.
aren't we throwing ourselves into the Proposition 218 mode if we try to
Sorry,
tax
yeah,
I don't wanna
vacant
take this down that
spaces?
road.
And there may be one city that's talked about it recently in California, so I'm interested in learning a little bit more about it. I haven't looked at it yet, but it's something that could be aligned with this. If we move it to a yellow, it doesn't mean that we can't jump in from time to time when there are opportunities. Occasionally we do meet with prospective businesses, and we've met with a couple this week that were interested in talking to the city. So.
In that regard, and with Jesse Duarte here, I'd like to say, in the paper, the Calistoga version, which is different than the St. Helena version, there's an article last week about revitalizing downtown Calistoga. So it's very interesting that not just St. Helena is facing these sorts of issues. And I'd be curious, I know that you occasionally have conversations with the folks in Calistoga. It'd be interesting to know what they're seeing and how they're approaching it. Maybe we can learn something.
Other cities like Healdsburg and many other cities are dealing with similar issues.
Another comment I'd like to make, just to put it on the record, is, we sort of castigate the landlords in town, and I think not all landlords are charging exorbitant rents. I know that there's existing businesses here who have very fair rents, in my view. So those landlords are keeping those. They could jack those rents up. For some of a couple of the restaurants I know about, I have personal knowledge about what those rents are, and so I think it's some landlords' rents are higher, but there are a lot of very fair and just landlords in our community, and I know about them. I think we should acknowledge that too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to ask the council. There's one final item that I don't want to cut this short, but we may run out of time. There's one final item that would require somebody from the council perhaps joining me to work on something. It's a timely issue with the county. are we at a point where we can?
Let me ask a couple just final clarifying questions. I was thinking that if the council wanted to go through each goal, we could say, any comments on goal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think the feedback I'm receiving is we have a pretty good product here. There's a little more work involved in having council members aligned with the goals. I think that takes a little bit of time, and it would be a bit of a struggle tonight if we walked through it. And I'm happy to invite you. What we can do is send you an invitation to send us your preferences on what items, topics you'd be interested in working on, and bring that back to you. And then at the following meeting, we would be able to quickly move through and identify a council member to work on policy issues. We can update the items that you've provided feedback on tonight. And just in terms of the cannabis issue, I didn't hear that there was interest in adding that to the list at this time.
I would say no, but I would say a question I would have, first of all, is, what is the community's view? But second, if you're looking at changing the downtown zoning, is that something that is recommended that we would add as a permitted use, or is there another zoning district that we could consider that it might eventually belong in? I think we were asked specifically to allow it right in downtown at Pope in Maine.
So if we're looking at zoning, that might be where we could at least look in future.
I like that idea since it was voted on, and I'd rather have us at least look at it and be able to say instead of it coming up as a ballot measure.
It's funny, I just haven't found citizens clamoring for it. But take a look, I suppose.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I need a unanimous motion to move past 9:30.
Would anybody like to make that motion? Or we could move on to this next item in 1 minute and what do you think?
My clock says it's 9:25.
Well, I'm asking for it.
I'm not sure we're going to get that unanimous.
Could we postpone the final item to?
The reason not to is because there's an April 1st date that the county needs that is going to be moving forward. So the cities needs, in my opinion, to get our voice in on this. I think it's important, and it would just be designating one person to work with me if they wanted to try to come up with some language to bring back to the council. That's item 10.7. Is there any thought that? Should we close item 6, or do we want to stay for another half hour, another 10 minutes, 15 minutes?
I'm willing to stay. I think the most significant issue that we need to talk about on the next item would be whether we should be promoting a 500-foot buffer around our Bell Canyon Reservoir. That's the most central question. That's what the Board of Supervisors and their staff are looking for us to answer. Calistoga has answered that question. We have not. There are other issues, of course, but I think that's the primary one. We should talk about instructing our city manager to write a letter to the Board of Supervisors on that policy issue.
Yes, I think
I'm willing to stay to talk about that one issue because time is of the essence, or having a special meeting, but I think we can do it right now. We should take the vote.
Okay, so we'll have the vote.
This may be the last time I do this, so.
So I'll make the motion.
Is that a motion?
I'll make the motion to have that to stay the extra half hour.
Or
I'll second.
Yeah, hopefully 5 minutes.
5 minutes, yes.
Mayor Ellsworth?
Yes.
Councilmember Chateau?
Yes.
Knudsen?
Yes.
Oberstein?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Doring?
Yes.
Okay, so where are we on 10.6? Are we
10.5?
I'm sorry, 10.5. Where are we? Is there anything that you would like more?
Just clarity on the cannabis issue.
I'm not suggesting we launch into a big community thing. I would like a reading from our consultant who is going to help us on the zoning and the downtown as to whether we should spend time thinking about it in that location, or if it is going to have some negative impact on what we're trying to do downtown, and then we could put it aside for later to have, the community weigh in if we're going to go that direction.
I think including in the zoning conversation seems appropriate.
So this would be post general plan adoption.
It's whenever we're working on the
We would-
downtown zoning. Is that a use that we want to put in?
I have a significant experience regulating cannabis, and many cities choose to not allow them specifically in downtown. However, I think St. Helena is somewhat of a unique jurisdiction. I think it would just be included as a broader jurisdictional analysis of the overall commercial zoning.
And is that, just to clarify, is that post general plan adoption, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so I can include a reference to that. Also, Councilmember Knudsen raised the idea of elevating the trails concept into this, unless you felt comfortable that it was in a work plan that was coming to the council on March 12th.
I don't think it is, but I guess what I was flagging was that I think there's going to be something that bubbles up out of the Parks and Rec committee, and maybe there's so maybe it will be in the March 12th. I guess you're right. So likely.
I think it may be one of the items that's included. I could be wrong about that. I didn't attend the meeting.
Well, there's also there was this. I don't want to waste Paul's time, but we can talk about it offline. But yes.
Okay.
But I'm comfortable where it is, and just letting the council know that it may bubble up at some point. Thank you.
Okay. And the final item would be, I recommend that we bring this status report to the council on a quarterly basis rather than every other month like last year. If that's okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think so.
Okay, so we'll bring this back on March 12th with some edits.
Thank you.
And Mr. Knudsen, everything you say is not a waste of my time. I really do appreciate your comments.
I'm sorry, that was flippant. I want to respect the fact that it's after 9:30. It's also Ms. Koberstein's birthday, and both of you guys are sacrificing to hear us, and all the staff, and we're all here. So, but thank you very much, Vice Mayor Doring, for your thoughts.
Okay, we'll move now to item 10.7. This is discussion and direction regarding County of Napa draft water quality and tree protection ordinance. And the staff report was prepared by Mr. Prestwich.
Thank you, Mayor. So as Vice Mayor Doreen indicated, the county is looking to the city to provide feedback on setback number related to watersheds. So we have a reservoir, we have vineyard development that's occurring above that reservoir. There have been numbers tossed about, and I believe the number being used by the county in a draft ordinance that went to the Planning Commission last week, County Planning Commission, was 200 feet. It's my understanding that the city of Napa has recommended a distance of 500 feet. The city engineer, public works director is available for some comment on this item. They are moving relatively quickly, so it's my understanding that this will be coming to the Board of Supervisors relatively quickly. I don't have a specific date yet, but I do anticipate it may occur within the next 4 to 8 weeks. And so the concept here is to potentially have a council member or two to work with the staff on preparing feedback. Either if there's time available, we would bring you a recommendation, potentially the full council, for a discussion. Or if there's no time, the council would empower those 1 or 2 council members to work with staff on preparing a city perspective and formal letter to the county.
Thank you. Eric, or Ms. Smithers, do you have a... Oh, sorry.
This was brought to my attention on February 13th and immediately forwarded on to Noah and City Manager Mark Prestwich just to get their input and feedback on this. And then I was prompted again the day of their commission meeting, actually the evening, I'm not sure if it was the day of or the evening of their commission meeting, less than a week later, on our decision. And I believe he prompted our director here of planning the same question while I was out on a conference. The pressure to get this done, they want to reconvene in March. And you said April 1st, but I believe it's March 19th, go out to Board of Supervisors for a decision. And I immediately responded and reached out to our sister agencies, Calistoga and City of Napa. And Joy Eldridge, who's the deputy director for the water utility in City of Napa, said 500 feet, because look at take of our reservoirs and our property ownership, and we exceed 200 feet. And I took a look today at Bell Canyon, finally time to look at the maps, and just on a visual, there's like one area where we're at 145 and one area where we're like 196 feet setback is our own property. The rest of them are well over 400 foot setback. So a 200 foot setback does nothing for encroaching on our watershed. We have no control over it. And the further setback until there's more distinguished studies done on the impacts of these vineyards, there's one of the ongoing conversations, there's been no baseline study on how the long-term effect is of all these vineyards converting above our watersheds. And we need to be very conservative and protective of our municipal water, let alone the main watershed going down the river. But the Water Board has implemented requirements for vineyards for the sediment-impaired Napa rivers, and we need to make sure that those are incorporated on our local jurisdictions at the county level.
So are you saying we don't have the tests right now available for the water quality to know?
That's something we, City of Napa's taken. They've been taking lead on wanting these as water effluent is leaving, not, I shouldn't say effluent, but as stormwater is leaving these vineyard conversions above the watershed, they should be taking samples of them so we know what's leaving their site. You know, we have all these theoretical written paper from consultants when they're doing the conversions, but what's happening after that? Once they've implemented their project, are they following through? How do we know what's leaving their property? I mean, they can identify everything that they need to do on their conversion and implementation, but what's actually happening as downstream of the site?
Okay. So you're saying 500 feet's better for us to protect?
Until further studies can be evaluated, determine what that proper setback is, I'm going to be conservative.
Okay, thank you.
One way I like to look at it is that it's not just an environmental discussion, it's an economic discussion. If we look at the value of water as a component in property value, the city of St. Helena, our municipal water supports $2.5 billion of property investment in St. Helena alone. We also provide water to many wineries south of us. Multinational beverage corporations are dependent upon us to deliver water, and Bell Canyon and the Bell Canyon Reservoir is our harvesting and for harvesting water and inventorying our water that supports this economy. And so I think a discussion about how we protect those waters is critical, and so it's moving fast in the county. So I just want to make sure that we are putting our voice in there too.
Is it just the water issue? Is it also the timberland conversion?
Well, that's part of it, and it affects the water. So it's a larger watershed issue, but the water in our reservoir is a critical component of the overall issue. And it's to me, moving away from just an environmental argument, and I think there's plenty of that, but looking at the economics of water and the value of water to property values that we as a city are responsible for providing clean water access. So I think it's just having a conversation and figuring out how do we set it up so that by the 19th we have some council input and some staff input. So if there's, I've been following this, I'm happy to continue participating. Is there another council member that might want to join me in working with the staff? I don't want to overload anybody too much. I don't think it'll take too much, but just to work on something.
I'm going to be writing something about the ballot,
Right,
so I'm going to decline.
I can write something up and then run it by Paul if we're on the water thing. If I run by what I write, run it by you.
I think the letter should be relatively short, and it should be written by our city manager. I think we have direction about the buffer zone. You can add a little bit more language there. Things that came to my mind is also, in the interim, we should encourage a study between the city of St. Helena and Napa County, as Napa City and Napa County are doing. So we should also encourage a study. we can put that in the letter. We'd like to have more communication with Napa County on our watershed and the projects that are going through the process, so that we have input. I want to make sure that that if we do have this buffer zone, that anything that's a municipal purpose would be exempt from that buffer, that there may be some things that we need to do inside that buffer zone that benefit our domestic water supply, that we should be able to do that. Yeah, those are the things, and we should be able to put that in the letter in 3 or 4 paragraphs.
And keep it really simple.
Yep.
Yeah, simpler the better. I think they really want to know about the buffer zone, and I think if we concentrate on that, it's going to be more effective than having a larger argument. And there are hundreds of, well, I wouldn't say hundreds, but there are tens of letters going in right now that are covering all these different issues. Our issue, we have a fiduciary duty to protect our municipal water supply, and that's it. That's what we're here to do. And so I think we need to make sure that gets imparted to the Board of Supervisors in a fairly short letter. I'd be happy to review the first draft by the first draft from the city manager.
I think that sounds excellent. If you're up for
Yes,
putting something
thank you.
together, does that sound?
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Sound good? Okay. Anything else? With that, I will adjourn the meeting. I thank everybody very, very much. Thank you, Paul. No, yeah, you're right. Did you get a call? Absolutely, yeah. I think it's great. Yeah, I think it's great. Thank you.
Well, we added a couple other things, like a baseline study. Napa County says that baseline study is going to take 5 to 10 years. You got to start it now, then.
Yeah, right.
5 to 10 years.
Yeah. Thank you.